You're turning professional and you're boxing, let's say, York Hall on a non-televised fight. You have to sell tickets to earn any money, but you have to cover the wages of your opponent as well. So if you don't have the ability to be able to sell enough tickets, you effectively have to pay to fight.
A far cry then from Jake Paul facing Mike Tyson in 2024, when the purse was reported to be around £48 million. But the vast amounts of cash lining the top dog's pockets isn't the norm in a typical fight.
Let's say you're lucky and you get between 5 and 10 grand. You're going to get 10 grand max for that. 10% goes to the trainer, 25% goes to the manager. Then we've got the tax man to pay as well. So we're cutting that money in at least half. So now you've got 5 grand for a 10-week camp. So you're talking about a guy here earning, he might be clearing 500 quid a week. How do you support a family on that? So boxers chase the dream. And, you know, there's probably 2% of them that actually make it.
So say you do make it and you start to rise up the ranks. Strikers Boxing, a training academy, says the mid-tier fighters can earn more, somewhere between £10,000 and £50,000 a fight, depending on record, profile, opponent and popularity of weight class. It's only at the top level does the real cash start flowing in, with the top-tier professionals, i.e. those going for titles, earning 6 figures a fight. Something else you'll have heard of is the terms prize fighter or journeyman. A prize fighter is, as it sounds, someone who picks up fights where they can and gets a nice big check if they win. Journeymen are the fighters who take on up-and-comers, effectively used for experience in the ring. Even if they're going up against the real prospects, a young Anthony Joshua, for example, these guys will be lucky to earn more than 10 grand. So the average boxer isn't as rich as you'd think.
Good evening and welcome to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express. And if we're missing our Luis Enrique again tonight, all love to you from all of us. As always, Danny, I, Andy Brassel, you, Ousmane Dembele, have slipped into the player coach's role once more. And we're delighted to have drafted in the Kvisha Kvaratskhelia. That's right, it doesn't have to be a rainy night to welcome the virtuoso Lars Sivertsen. Welcome along, Lars. Loads going on for you tonight. We've got our first big trophy winners of the season in both Germany and Spain. We're mopping up the explosive last 8 of the Champions League, not to mention the Europa and the Conference, of course. We've got some big live games going on. We speak to Tim Vickery later, live from Brazil, and who knows, if there's time, we might even get Icardi watch off the ground at last. It's Sunday night, so bienvenue à bord, the Trans-Europe Express. Trans-Europe Express. Welcome one, welcome all, and good evening, Lars Sivertsen. How are you?
I love good evening, Andy. I love the Kvaratskhelia comparison. You know, he's someone who's a little lanky, a little unpredictable. You know, can take turns you don't expect. I feel like I've got a lot to live up to now in the next 3 hours. We're going to try to occasionally take it into unexpected directions. Let's see how we do with that.
With that in mind, Lars, bear in mind that I am in the seat of the great Luis Enrique, so I will expect you to do some running off the ball as well. And I know you won't let me down in that sense. But look, let's get straight into it. There's a huge story this weekend as Marie-Louise Eta became the first female head coach in the top 5 European leagues, as she took the interim position, and she took her first game in charge of the interim position at Union Berlin after the sacking of Stefan Baumgart, which you guys talked about last weekend. But her first game against Wolfsburg this weekend, they're at home. They played well, Union, but they lost to the second bottom side. And such an unusual situation, such an unusual atmosphere. And the way she was welcomed at Union, which is the most progressive of clubs anyway, we have to say, Lars, was quite beautiful. When they read out the team there at Köpenick before the game, after every player's name is announced, they say, Fußballgott, football god. And they said, Fußballgötterin, which is football goddess, after hers, which was a lovely touch. She got a big hug from our opposite number, Dieter Hecking of Wolfsburg, who's under a lot of pressure at the moment. And she seemed really calm under pressure as well. Look, we know this is a huge thing for football and the future of football. But I think what's been slightly overlooked is A, the fact that she's a very logical appointment, as you and Kev touched on last week. And B, the fact is she's been dropped into, as is often the case when a manager is sacked, a pretty difficult position.
Yeah, I think those are two key points. I'd like to start with the first one because I think it's important to say for people who haven't been 100% across this story is that when you hear, and we've gotten a little bit cynical maybe, when you hear stories like that, there will be listeners who thought, that seems like a PR stunt, that seems like tokenism, yada, yada, yada. But it's important to stress that she was the coach of the men's under-19 team at the club. She's been involved with the running of the men's senior team before. She's in fact taken charge of the senior team on a match day before. So this was the kind of fairly logical internal promotion that you see at a lot of clubs when you get rid of a head coach and you want a steady hand for the last couple of games in the run in. You don't want to commit to a new long-term deal with a new coach. You get someone internal who you consider to be a good coach, who you know has a pre-existing relationship with the members of the squad, and you put them in charge. It's something you see at clubs all over the world pretty much every season. The only difference is she is a woman, which makes it groundbreaking in some ways, but it isn't as if she's a completely external person that they've just brought in and just see let's see how this goes. They will have known, the decision makers at the club will have known ahead of making this decision how she was viewed in the squad, whether she would have a chance of having the necessary buy-in from the players. And although they lost the first game, there was nothing to suggest that this will go very badly wrong. I mean, I saw the game. They outshot Wolfsburg by 25-5. They really should have gotten a result. Some slightly iffy finishing, which you can't really blame the coach for. But yeah, this is more... It's groundbreaking on the one hand, but the process leading up to it is quite natural in a way.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, she focused on that afterwards. She said, look, I realize this is a big thing and I'm not used to all the attention, all the cameras being on me. Of course, there are a record amount of people, journalists from all over the world at her press conference where she spoke pre-game a couple of days ago as well at Köpenick. And, she said, it's not about me. It's about football. But I think the way that she's handled it is quite similar to, I think it's easy to make the comparisons between her and Sabrina Wittmann, who is the head coach of Ingolstadt in the third tier, and she has been for going on 2 years now. Because they've worked up, they know the club that they're in really well. They've coached teams at all different sorts of levels, and I think that having that respect, having that buy-in, as you say, is hugely important. Now let's briefly talk about the position that they're in and the job that she's going to have to do for Union, because Stefan Baumgart was sacked because they were on a really terrible run. They were awful. They lost a bottom team, Heidenheim, last weekend, and they were really rotten in that. So this was a vastly improved performance. I mean, she should still be able to see it over the line. They're 6 points clear of the relegation playoff place with 4 games to go. But the sooner they get a win, the better. I mean, did this underline a little bit like what the weaknesses are in the squad and the limited resources she has?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a classic performance by a team that's down there a little bit, in that there was a lot of endeavor, a lot of effort, and no one was putting out of any challenges, but they just lack a little bit of composure and a little bit of skill in the final third. Nice goal by Oliver Burke, but towards the end of the season, end of the game, they were really just getting the ball in and around Wolfsburg's box constantly, but people were fluffing their lines and just lacking a little bit of quality and composure. You'd think if they play exactly like this in all remaining games, they will find the points that they need. Maybe not in the next game against Leipzig away. That's a tricky one, but then they play Köln, Mainz, and Augsburg. And again, a performance like this should see them get some points out of those three and avoid the drop for sure.
Yeah, they don't want to turn those into dogfights. That's for sure. But the thing that I guess slightly surprised me, I mean, the way Union have dealt, particularly online, with some of the sexist barbs that unfortunately you would expect, because that is part of modern social media, has been pretty good, particularly on their English feed. They've been completely dismissive of it, and you love to see that. But what I thought was slightly more surprising is the fact that the club, or all people on the board at the club, don't appear to be quite on the same page. So you had on the Monday press conference introducing Eta, you had the sporting director, Horst Held, who's on the touchline yesterday, saying that we'll just have these 5 games with Marie-Louise in charge, and we'll see how she gets on, and we'll have a think about it from there. Obviously, we're talking to other coaches as well, etc., etc. And then you had Dirk Zingler, the president, come out before this game against Wolfsburg and saying, look, it's just for these 5 games. That's all. Now, look, that may seem a slight division, but I thought the way that Zingler framed it was quite smart, because, of course, before being appointed, Marie-Louise Eta was already appointed as head coach of the women's team, the Union women's team, for next season. And he said, well, I don't want it to be a situation, let's just say it's for those 5 games, or I'm saying it's for those 5 games, because we don't want a situation where it's, if you do well, you're with the men, and if it doesn't go well, you take over the women, because that does a disservice to women's football.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of framing it. I thought Horst Held, I mean, okay, maybe not 100% on the same page, but I thought he spoke very well earlier in the week when he just pointed out that if there's been any, well, the extent to which there were sexist comments on social media, he just said that it's just embarrassing, and just said that it is, I mean, his exact quote is that I find it insane that we have to deal with this in this day and age. And we're talking about a highly competent leader, which is, again, you are obviously entitled to have your view about anything, but the thing to bear in mind as well, like, even if you think there are maybe dressing rooms in the world who would not take well to a female head coach, and maybe there are, in this case, they know that the players know her already. The club know what the relationships are. The club, and I also do wonder if in German football, like we had a female ref, Bibiana Steinhaus was a referee in the Bundesliga for many years, and that was fine. So this is just culturally, I think it is not as much as of an extreme development as it might have been in some places. And yeah, I think this is fine.
The German football seems really well placed to deal with this. We talked about Wittmann. You talked about Bibiana Steinhaus as they're good examples, and hopefully Marie-Louise Eta is the start of something as well, whether that's her continuing with Union Berlin or anything else. Look, there are a few big games tonight, as I was discussing before. I've got my eye on currently Paris Saint-Germain 0, Lyon 2. Now, I don't know how you can be in 2 places at once, Lars, but Kvisha Kvaratskhelia has just come on and drawn a good save from Dominic Greif. 2 first-half goals for Lyon. Alfonso Moreira creating the opener for Endrick, who's in form again. Endrick returning the favour for Alfonso for the second. It's been pretty much an onslaught from PSG since then, and they've since brought on Kang In Lee. They've brought on Kvaratskhelia, as we mentioned before. Worrying-looking injury from their perspective to Vitinha in the first half, who landed awkwardly and then went off the field and sort of took his boot off as he was limping down the tunnel, which is never a particularly good sign, is it? But you've got your eyes on what's going on in Italy, haven't you, Lars?
I'm kind of trying to do both, Andy. I mean, I can tell you in Italy, Juventus are 2-0 up against Bologna, which is it's a big result for them. Jonathan David gave them the lead early on in the game to kind of settle any nerves they may have had. Kefren Thuram has added another one in the second half to make it 2-0. And those 3 points, it's quite tight, the race for the 4th Champions League spot in the Bundesliga, with between Juventus, Como, and with Roma lurking there as well. So 3 points here would be very, very handy indeed for Juventus, and it's 2-0 now in the middle of the second half. Yeah,
it'd be a great result for Spalletti and co. If they won that game, that would put them 5 points clear of 5th place. And as it looks like Italy probably won't get the extra Champions League place, we'll maybe update you a little bit on that later when we're talking about the Champions League. That could be a huge thing. Now, we're talking about football gots before. We've got Kevin Hatchard joining us next here on Trans Europe Express.
I'm enjoying Britain's Got Talent. Are you more into? You've not hit your golden buzzer yet, have you?
No, I have. I hit it for Rafferty. Yeah, I hit it for Rafferty, 16-year-old boy who gelled music and magic together. It was really sick.
And like the last one, I watched one last night. I thought it was recording. The choir at the end were very good. The kids from Wales.
Yeah,
very good.
We did the whole 6-7 thing. Do you even understand what that is?
I was going to say you get some numpties on there as well.
Oh, you do. But
what about the guy with the Scotch egg? He wants sectioned.
KSI, I've got before I let you go. You're talking about 16-year-old magician Max Dowman. What about your team? Have you got a little bit of panic on the Arsenal?
Nah, zero panic. I know.
Back to Trans Europe Express with me, Andy Brassel, and Lars Sivertson. I was just looking across, Lars, to PSG versus Lyon. 68 minutes, still 2-0 to Lyon. Obviously, Lucas Hernandez has just got booked because that is his thing. He did a late tackle and a sneaky little handball at the same time. He's 30 years old now. How old do you have to be, do you think, before you stop putting slits in your eyebrow?
I mean, I think there's not an age limit on that. I mean, I think maybe there's probably plenty of people who, like, the midlife crisis hits them hard and we decide, okay, we want the slits in the eyebrows now. Do you think that would work for me, Andy? Do you think that should that be the thing for me?
Well, look, we'll find out next week, right? I mean, as we're in glorious HD, you can, of course, join us on YouTube as well as on talkSPORT app and on the good old-fashioned wireless. So, get in touch, people, at talkSPORT and tell us what you think.
I know out of the two, Lyon are a more sympathetic team to the neutral than PSG, perhaps particularly for those of us on this broadcast who have a connection to that place.
Maybe.
But it would be a little bit of a robbery if this result holds, because I've got this game on as well, and it is absolutely all PSG. I mean, they are all over Lyon here. Do you think there's any chance Lyon hold out this evening?
Look, Lyon have not dug a trench, but that's only because they don't have a shovel. But let's talk about the imperious teams of European football, because if he's not here, he's there. Kevin Hatchard is over in Germany. He was over in Germany today to witness FC Bayern München become Bundesliga champions for the 35th time. How are you, Kev?
I'm good. I'm wondering how late it is that you can put slits in your eyebrows. I've never done it. So at 46, is it too late for me to start?
Well, I reckon if you wipe off the beer shower and then decide, obviously, because that's a huge part of Bundesliga title celebrations. Look, it briefly looked as if Stuttgart might upset things at the Allianz Arena when they went ahead, but you just can't stop this Bayern from scoring, can you?
No, and I think that's the key to it, Andy, because you've got a team here that is relentless, insatiable. It just never, ever shifts down the gears. It's amazing, really. I mean, they went into this knowing that they only needed a point to secure the title. They knew that realistically they could probably lose all of their remaining games and still win the title because their goal difference is so good and so superior to Borussia Dortmund. But as soon as they went behind, then they really went for Stuttgart. And once they got the equaliser that came from some brilliant play from Jamal Musiala, they were relentless after that. 95 seconds later, Nicholas Jackson makes it 2-1. Alphonso Davies scored. That was great for him because he's had a horrible time with injury. It was his first goal of the season, first league goal since 2024. And then Harry Kane and Michael Olise come on at half-time, and that's not fair.
It's not.
Not fair at all. And then really early in the second half, Olise takes the corner, it's headed back across goal, half cleared, but then forced back across, and Kane taps in from close range. So what's really interesting, I think, about this Bayern team, they're one of the best Bayern teams I've seen. I think they might be one of the most likeable Bayern teams I've seen. I think, there's often a lobby of anyone but Bayern, but I do think people have really warmed to Kompany, and I think they've really warmed to this team.
Yeah, and how do you rank them? Can we rank them? Is that too much of a... Because they're on 79 points now. One more win and they'll equal the points total from last season. They've had plenty of seasons recently where they haven't gotten to this sort of a total. Are we sort of back to Guardiola's time at the club for the last time they were this good?
Yeah, Lars, I think that's a really good parallel, because I think if you look at the numbers, they're right up there with Guardiola's teams. Now, one of Guardiola's teams wrapped up the championship by match day 27, which is absolutely extraordinary. But this Bayern team has scored more goals than any team ever has before at this stage of a Bundesliga season. In any Bundesliga season. So they've broken the record that stood since 1972. They're now 8 goals past the record. So they're on track to score over 120 goals in a 34-game season. That is, by any metric, absolutely jaw-dropping. And they're not just reliant on Kane. They can hurt you in so many different ways with so many different players. They're a very, very special football team.
And I wanted to ask you, Kev, actually, with Kane in mind, we now know pretty much that he's not going to break Robert Lewandowski's season record. Of course, fitness has been a part of that. He was left on the bench today. And Kompany has been pretty clear, hasn't he? Going back over a number of weeks, he said, look, I don't care about the individual record. We want to win our stuff as a team, and that's what we want to do. And he's clearly protected him with the Champions League in mind. Maybe if he hadn't have done that, he wouldn't have been able to make the contribution that he did to those 2 legs against Real Madrid in the quarterfinal. But clearly they're looking after him a bit. I mean, as Kane goes into his 30s, what does this say about the future management of Kane and how long we could keep Kane going? And is the way that Kompany's handling him actually a good thing for England going into the World Cup?
I think it's a really good thing, because I think going into the Euros, for example, he clearly had that back injury. I don't think he looked fit.
No.
I think this is different. I think they are able to take him out the firing line when they need to. Nicholas Jackson got a goal today, played perfectly well. And even though Jackson won't be there next season, I think it does show that Kompany... I think what Kompany has is he has the gravitas and he has the pull to be able to say to Kane, mate, I know you want to play every game, but you can't. And I think Kane will accept that from Kompany. And I think he'll accept being stood down. And I also think you're absolutely right about their individual scoring records, chasing Lewandowski. I always think when the debate comes up about whether Kane will rush back to the Premier League to break the Premier League scoring record, I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the man. I think he is very focused on winning trophies. I think he's much more focused on that than individual records. I think he'd happily score 10, 15 goals fewer if he was guaranteed to win the treble. So, I think that plays into it too.
So, Kev, having won the title at this point, I kind of attention passes from me from Bayern and down to Dortmund, who messed up again this weekend. They're 15 points behind Bayern now. And we touched on this last week on this very show. I cannot make up my mind if this is a glass half full or glass half empty season for them. The season before last, they finished 5th and were 27 points behind Bayern. Last season, they were 4th, but they were just 12 points. And now they're 15th behind, but they're likely to finish 2nd. So have they restored their position as the best of the rest? Have they gotten a platform from which to challenge Bayern, or are they just miles off it?
No, I don't think they're miles off it. I think what's interesting is that if they, I mean, it's all ifs, buts and maybes, but let's say they'd won one of the games against Bayern instead of losing both of them, they'd obviously be a lot closer to Bayern then. And I think this kind of sense of recent drift that we've had wouldn't necessarily have happened. They weren't great against Hoffenheim, that's the truth of it. And Hoffenheim really needed that win, and you could tell, I think. There is a big debate about Niko Kovac. I think the numbers are good. I think the points total's good. I think they have been much, much better under him than they were previously, maybe. They're certainly much more consistent and solid. Is the football going to entertain? Probably not, and that's a big debate for Dortmund fans. I don't think he's particularly warm or likeable. That's the way Dortmund fans would see it. I think he gets a bit of a bad rep, actually. I don't think he always helps himself. I think he's more personable than he gives himself credit for in interviews and stuff. I think it's really difficult because, where can they really go? They can have runs in the Champions League, but if you're always the best of the rest and you're finding Bayern so difficult to keep pace with, it's really difficult to actually know where you're at as a football club.
Ousmane Dembélé has just ping-a-ling-a-linged one off the crossbar from absolutely miles out. Talking of that PSG siege, as Lars was a minute ago, still 2-0 to Lyon for the moment with about 15 minutes left in that game. I wanted to ask you, Kev, lastly, about Leverkusen, actually, because this was meant to be their opportunity this weekend. We were talking about the race in the Champions League and the best of the rest and all that sort of thing. Now, it's become clear over the length of this season that Leverkusen, in terms of money, in terms of status, can't really afford to miss out on the Champions League. They were at home to Augsburg. They knew that Stuttgart were going to Bayern, so they had the chance to catch up. They got themselves in front in that game yesterday through Patrick Schick against Augsburg. And despite having 36 shots, the most shots that a team has had in a Bundesliga game since they started counting the numbers, so going back, 12, 13, 14 years, it's the biggest amount of shots that a team has had without winning a Bundesliga game, because a couple from Fabian Rieder, and they actually lost the game in the end. Now, Mark Flecken, the former Brentford goalkeeper, said afterwards, it's not a crisis. That's utter nonsense. But it kind of is, isn't it?
I think they'll play a lot worse than this and win. But the problem they have is that because they've had performances where they did deserve to lose this season, they've been playing catch-up for quite some time. And I think they have dropped a lot of points that they shouldn't have. And that's put them in a really difficult position. You've had this really weird scenario in the Bundesliga this season where the top six have been so much better than the rest. And so you've got a real bun fight beyond Bayern and Dortmund for these last 2 or maybe 3 places for the Champions League. Because we don't know at this stage whether Germany could chase down Spain for the European performance slot. And I suspect Bayern will have a lot to do with that. Hoffenheim have been the fly in the ointment. They've been the team that nobody expected to be there. I was talking to Moritz Volz today, who was my co-commentator, and he is the assistant coach at Hoffenheim, and he said to me they really needed that win against Dortmund because it had been on the slide and they were starting to lose a bit of traction, lose a bit of face. They're right back in the mix now. Kesper Hjulman's going to have to come up with solutions, and he's going to have to do it quickly, because you're absolutely right. If the top 5 make it into the Champions League and Leverkusen are not in that top 5, that is going to be seen as a really poor season and a huge setback for the club.
Yeah, it will be. Well, obviously, I want to thank you for joining us as always, Kev, but I can't let you go. TEE tradition requires me to ask you for a star of the week. And you know what? If it's not an obscure one, I'm going to be disappointed, and so will the listeners. No pressure.
It's not quite obscure because it's from the Nord Derby, which is a massive game, but I commentated on that on Saturday. Amazing atmosphere. Werder against Hamburg. And I'm going to give it to Jens Stay. Captain fantastic. Was a real fitness doubt for the game. They worked on him, got him in starting 11. He lasted 66 minutes, and in those 66 minutes, he scored twice, won a bullet header, won a stunning winner from long range. So I'm going to give it to Werder Bremen's Jens Stay.
Yeah, good for him. Lars, can you come back at that?
Yeah, I'm going to come with the first of what I expect will be many examples of sort of clear Nordic bias from me this evening. I'm going to give it to Antonio Nusa, who popped up with a goal and an assist for Leipzig against Frankfurt. And listen, I know Kev's been banging the drum for Diomande all season. Diomande has had an incredible season, and Nusa hasn't maybe had the total outstanding breakout year that I was hoping he would at the age of 21. But when he is on, like there's flashes of real greatness there. Quick, fleet-footed winger who can go both ways. Good with both feet. And I think he is someone like for a potential breakout star of the World Cup. Like he's someone who has it. He scored great goals against Italy in the World Cup qualifiers for Norway. Such a good player, and a goal and an assist for Leipzig on Friday against Frankfurt.
Yeah, if we're talking of great Scandinavians, the Great Dane, Konrad Harder, will be sitting there going, damn you, Sivertsen. In most other weeks, and damn you, Antonio Nusa. In most other weeks, you would have picked me. But thanks anyway, Lars, and thank you, Kev. We will be going to France next on Trans-Europe Express.
When PSG decided to go and score, they went and scored 2 goals. And I look at Frimpong, that's a signing that hasn't worked. He's not good defensively, and he's not good going forward.
It's amazing, isn't it, the downgrade of the 2 full-back areas after last year.
Yeah, I'd still back Kyrgios to come good. I saw enough at Bournemouth to suggest there's a player in there, and I'm surprised with his personality how much he seems to have struggled with the weight of that Liverpool shirt. But then it's been a season of struggle for his more established teammates as well. It's a huge summer, isn't it? We reported yesterday that Richard Hughes, the sporting director, is going to stay despite interest from Al Hilal over in Saudi Arabia. But they need a lot of players, and I'm just seeing there, Joe Gomez is injured again. You can't rely on him to stay fit. Do they move on from Alexis McAllister, who's in the last 2 years of his contracts? Curtis Jones, I think, was keen to move to Inter Milan in January. Does that rear its head again? What do they do to replace Mo Salah and Andy Robertson? These are big decisions that
Ekitike out now for probably 9 to 12 months.
Yeah, and when is he going to be fit for next season?
Exactly. And Isak, has had injury problems, hasn't he, during his career, especially at Newcastle. So you can't rely on him. Exactly.
Dreadful.
Adam Wharton, a name mentioned to me this morning. We know there's a lot of interest in him for the summer, and Liverpool, one of the clubs apparently in the mix.
I couldn't understand, actually, and we had this discussion actually during the week, why they didn't go for a number 6 this summer, because that was clearly an area that they were putting a sticking.
talkSPORT Breakfast returns tomorrow from 6 a.m. as Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist are joined by a host of guests as they look back on a huge weekend which saw Manchester City and Ryan Shirky take advantage in the title race after their 2-1 victory over Arsenal. That's the talkSPORT Breakfast Show tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. Don't miss it. Or just don't go to bed after this. Yeah, that's right, because we're right in the thick of Trans-Europe Express. Only 30 minutes in, another 2.5 hours for you. We're taking you all the way through to midnight. We're off to France next, Lars, where our headline is Moody Mehdi marmalises Marseille. Of course, we're coming to the end of a possible shock at the Parc des Princes between Paris Saint-Germain and Lyon. Still 2-0 to Lyon there with about 4.5 minutes of normal time left. So we will come back to that in a second. I know you've got eyes on that. But let's talk about Moody Mehdi. Let's talk about Mehdi Benatia, because another bad result for Marseille this weekend, which will cost more if Lyon were to get a point or 3 from this game at the Parc des Princes, depending on what happens in these closing minutes. 2-0 down, or they went down 2-0, sorry, Marseille. Lorient, mid-table, have little to play for. As Benatia, who's often very outspoken as a sporting director, was afterwards. Now, obviously, we have to laugh when he starts any sentence by saying, look, you know I don't like to talk after these games. Like, of course you don't. But I've been forced to on this occasion when the performance was, as he put it, a scandal. And he advised his players to not make any plans for the next 4 weeks because you won't be going home much.
So I on the one hand, I do like it because there's something that's been a topic of conversation in England as well this year, is that since the sporting directors are becoming more and more powerful in England, as in the way they have been on the continent forever, they should probably also be more visible. They should probably speak to the media. It's unfair that the head coach is always the guy who has to front up and the sporting director makes a lot of the decisions and they just kind of hide in the background. So it's good that Mehdi, but with Moody Mehdi, as you titled him, I feel like there are very few situations that calls for the sporting director to like fan the flames even more. I think like very often what you want from the sporting director is to settle people down. But I guess in this case, I mean, he's been a player himself not too that long ago. Maybe his read of the dressing room is that they needed a little bit of a public boot up the backside here, and that they need to be told off a little bit in public because, yeah, he said we're going to spend a lot of time together. And he's also said that, you know, we organize training camps to build connections and work. That costs the club money, and yet nothing changes on the pitch. He's very unhappy with the situation, and also added that there are people who work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for much less than us. So if we need to push ourselves and be together more, we will. So yeah, I mean, famously in Italy, clubs go on retiro when they're in trouble, right? They're told they can't go home to the families. They either stay at the training ground or even go to like a resort somewhere. Do they do that in France as well? I mean, you know that patch better than I do.
Yeah, on occasion, they certainly do, and they do it at Marseille more than most, I suppose. Now, of course, we could point out
took them on retiro, didn't he?
He did, and you have to wonder at this point whether it was Mehdi Benatia's idea. Of course, he played for Juventus for a bit, so he's not unfamiliar with the ways of Italian football. But I guess it's a little bit like we always ask, you know, how much do you have to know a club to be a leader of it? And I guess this is what really comes into focus here, because you look at Benatia, and he didn't play for Marseille, but he came up through the first team level, but he came up through the youth academy. He's from the city. And, you know, we talked about De Zerbi when he was there, you know, is someone who's combustible, being at this really combustible club such a good thing. You know that little meme of the dog in the pork pie hat, like sipping his tea while the house is on fire, going, everything's fine. Like Benatia is the opposite of that. He's like, if that guy dropped the cup of tea, stood on the table, took his hat off and go, oh my God, the house is on fire. It's a little like that, really, isn't it? And obviously it'll be very awkward for Mason Greenwood if they're going to spend lots of time together over the next 4 weeks, because he doesn't speak to him.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not an advantage. You know, culturally, that's a funny one, because you mentioned, you know, Sven-Göran Eriksson. There's a lot of fans in England who just didn't connect with him because he was he could seem almost unengaged on the sideline. You know, he was always very calm. They loved him for that in Roma when he was there. Like when he was in Italy, they thought that was really cool. He was like the Iceman, you know, he's not fazed by anything. Like, this is good. We want this from a leader. So it really depends like what the context is and what the culture around is and what the fans want to see.
Yeah, you wanted to talk about Monaco as well, didn't you, Lars? Because another Poor result, underwhelming result for them today against Auxerre, who are struggling down near the bottom. Now, of course, they got absolutely thrashed after their recent good run away at Paris FC last time out. They were 2-0 down in the first half of this game against Auxerre, came back to make it 2-2. Folarin Balogun again scoring from a penalty, which he very much bought himself as well. But they couldn't quite get it over the line. And having accelerated so much to get them right back into the thick of things, now they're looking as if they might be on the brink of throwing it all away.
Yeah, seems like a quite big boo-boo for me. I mean, for people who are not across it, the race for the Champions League spots in France is tight. Lyon, if they hang on to this, move to third on 54 points, but it's only 4 points between them and Monaco down in seventh. So you've got 4 teams there, sort of scrapping it out for 2 spots. 5 teams scrapping it out for 2 spots, with Lille, Rennes, and Marseille also in the mix still. So given how much is at stake, you know, you've talked a lot on the show, I'm sure, the last few years about the financial problems in the French league with the television deal, all of that. That Champions League money is extremely important for the clubs who want to be ambitious. So this is a very fraught time of the year. What you really don't want to do then is drop points to Auxerre, who are in the relegation battle. I mean, they're in the 16th place, so they're in the promotion playoffs. With that win, they have given themselves a little bit of a lifeline. Maybe Sir Jim Radcliffe's Nice, they're now only 4 points ahead of Auxerre in 15th, so this could be bad news for them. But certainly that is not a result you're expecting or should accept. And again, I would like to bring the Nordic bias, but I have to say, Lukas Radetzky, the Finnish national team goalkeeper, had a weird one here. So Radetzky is an interesting character, actually born in Slovakia, but his father was a volleyball player, moved to Finland to play volleyball, and grew up in Finland, has 103 caps for Finland, and is someone who is like the life and soul of the dressing room for the Finnish national team, the joker of the pack, really well liked by his teammates, had many good seasons for Leverkusen. But he does have a rick in him. Like he's one of those really good shot stoppers. He's a great shot stopper, charismatic guy, likable fella. But once in a while, he'll chuck one in. And the first goal here against Auxerre is not a goalkeeping error. It's a shot that went through a lot of bodies, but you feel like a very good goalkeeper should fancy himself to stop it. And the second one was a straight up gaff, I'd say. So that not a good day at the office for Lukas Radetzky for Monaco. They managed to bring it back to 2-2, but that's still a very disappointing result for them.
Yeah, we're going to do the first of my fabled reading through the tables because, as Lars says, it is very tight. So you've got PSG as stands. This is the live table. PSG top on 63, Lens 62. Although PSG will have played a game less, they've got that game in hand. Not especially challenging one against Nantes. Then you got Lyon as stands 54, Lille 54, Rennes 53, Marseille 52, and as Lars says, Monaco on 50 in 7th. I mean, that is a bun fight. So to put that into some sort of perspective, top 3 qualify automatically for the Champions League. 4th goes into a playoff, which French teams are very rarely good enough to get through. So it's a figurative Champions League place rather than an actual Champions League place in many of occasions. I'm not going to ask you who's going to get there. We already know that Lens are almost certain of getting there, and they had a great comeback on Friday night against Toulouse, Lars.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting week in Serie A. I thought that was going to be the big story of the weekend, really, because Lens went down 2-0 at home to Toulouse. Toulouse then got a player sent off, and we had an entire second half of Lens really pushing for it. And I'm going to preempt the question, Andy, and just hand my star of the week to Alain Saint-Maximin, who was very lively in the second half for Lens. Came on. They've been managing his minutes a little bit after he returned to European football, but he's such he makes things happen, Saint-Maximin. He's the same character you remember from his time in England. Put a lot of crosses into the box, had 1 assist. Should I say he was busier than Samir Nasri's Deliveroo driver, Andy?
Yeah, that is fair to say. Talking of lively, we've got a goal back at the Parc des Princes. A goal for PSG. Kvisha Kvaratskhelia smashing one in from outside the area. Could have done with a cosmetic dive from Dominic Greif. Didn't get one. He's claiming he was banged on the head by Ousmane Dembélé as he strove to get the ball back to take a quick kick-off. Lyon are obviously going to try and kill the end of this stoppage time, so we'll keep you up to date on that. They've just smashed it as far as possible in the corner to try and kill time because we're very much near the end of stoppage time there. So we'll tell you if anything more spectacular happens there. My star of the week is going to be, going back to that Monaco-Auxerre game, it's going to be Lassine Sissoko. Not just because he scored a goal that at one point looked like it was going to be the winner for Auxerre in that game, but because he made a young fan's dream come true in the week. Now, a young fan had a trip round the Stade Abbé Deschamps, the home of Auxerre, and he thought he was just getting a tour of the ground and to meet the mascot, obviously bearing an Auxerre kit, all very fluffy and 7.5 foot tall, etc. And so he sits down, this little kid, next to the bear on the bench. Bear takes his head off. It's Lassine Sissoko. You could have knocked the kid over with a feather. It was absolutely beautiful. Wonderful to see. That we now have full time at the Parc des Princes. Lyon 1, PSG 2. Oh, wrong way round. PSG 1, Lyon 2. Not what we're expecting, of course, which is why I got it wrong. But a huge win for Lyon. Puts them into third. Fair play to Dominic Greif, who, of course, saved a first-half penalty as well, with what can only be described as his nuts. A lot calmer. We're going to Italy next on Trans-Europe Express.
Placed Tottenham Hotspur, very much down there and scrapping in the relegation zone. Tottenham fans reportedly have called off plans for another pre-match parade to welcome the team bus before Saturday's home game against Brighton.
Last time, didn't it?
Well, yeah, this is all to show a bit of passion and fervour. We're right behind the team, you know, etc., etc. But apparently they're calling it off. A statement by the organisers of Show Up, Sing Up, Stay Up campaign said they were disappointed at calling it off, but they support whatever Roberto De Zerbi sees fit in order for his players to have the best possible preparation. Apparently, De Zerbi decided his players will arrive at the stadium earlier and not by coach, so that they avoid fans lining the pitch, as we saw pre the Nottingham Forest game. Is he right, De Zerbi? Do you think? Is he taking the temperature down a bit?
Well, I assume he's got method to his madness. I mean, ultimately, the last time they did the show up, stand up, or whatever it was, didn't work so well, did it? They got beat 3-0 by Nottingham Forest. So I'm not so sure.
Trans-Europe Express, me, Andy Brassel, the great Lars Sivertsen alongside me tonight. And yes, we're going to Italy next for a bit of light relief after all that mayhem in France. It's called Ructions in Rome, this section, which we will come to in a second, but not before, Lars, we talk about this being the weekend that probably won the Scudetto for Inter. They won 3-0 against Cagliari on Friday night. And Napoli, the defending champions, losing 2-0 at home to Lazio. Look, in terms of the title itself, maybe this didn't make a difference, but the fact that Napoli have dropped 5 points in the last two games has certainly finished them off in chances, in terms of their chances of winning this all over again.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 9-point lead ahead of the weekend, but of course, recent events in England have taught us that 9-point leads are maybe not all that we think they are. Now it's become a 12-point lead, and it's very hard to see Inter throwing this away now. Home and hosed, Andy, home and hosed. I believe I did also describe Arsenal as home and hosed, really, or at least home and with the hose out. In the case of Inter, they're home and the hose is out, and they've switched on the water The hosing hasn't quite happened yet, as it has in Germany, but we're very close to the hosing taking place. And I don't know about you, Andy. I find this Inter team, as a neutral, someone without skin in the game, I find them occasionally a little bit hard to connect to. They're not like the most exciting group in the world. They don't do anything spectacular tactically. Maybe I'm being a little harsh on Lautaro, but there's maybe a few individual players that you really get out of the bed in the morning and think, yes, today I'm watching that guy. But you can't argue with the results. They're going to win the league, and deservedly so, I suppose.
Yeah, and with that in mind, we've had a real return to form from Marcus Thuram in a classic commentator's curse since our very own Daniele Fisichella said that he wasn't sold on Thuram. I mean, if we wanted to know that the stars listened to Trans-Europe Express, this is the proof, isn't it? Because ever since Daniele said that, Thuram has gone, right, I'm going to show you. He went off and was really good for France in those friendlies, and he started to hit it for Inter in recent weeks. Now, look, I suspect they will probably still try and sell him in the summer and make a good fee off a Premier League club. Which Premier League club would you buy him for?
Think about Marcus Thuram. He is a little bit streaky, and I guess that's why occasionally a commentator risks being struck by the curse, because there will be periods when you become a little bit impatient with him, and you just think, because he's got so many qualities, and you just want a little bit more from him more consistently. But listen, here's a striker who's 6'4", who gets around the pitch, like he's really mobile for that size, and definitely has periods when he is a good goal scorer up front. The thing that would count against him, I guess, is that he is 28, but we've had a good sort of recent history of like tall strikers being effective deep into their mid-30s, because you can kind of morph if your pace starts going. He has the frame to morph into something more of a target man, I think, if that sort of happens with him. So I think there are definitely clubs in England who could use him, and I think he definitely has the physical characteristics to thrive in England.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Notice how I stayed on the fence there, Andy. There's bark all up my backside.
Well, what I was going to say
is Newcastle, if they're reloading a little bit, the Isak replacement efforts haven't fully hit for them. They have a tremendous record of good French players up on Tyneside. Maybe one for Newcastle to take a look at this summer.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Although how he'd feel about stepping out of, well, perhaps any European football at the moment would remain to be seen. We're talking about goals over the continent. Still a couple of games going on. Interesting one in Portugal. Gabriel Veiga has just put Porto in front against Tondela, as you would maybe expect. But that could be a decisive lead for Porto at the top of the league, just as Inter have gained this weekend. And the other half of that, of course, of Inter's soon-to-be coronation is the fact that Napoli lost at home to Lazio, who I think is one of the underrated jobs of the season that Maurizio Sarri is doing. Obviously, he's been lied to by the board. He's not been able to bring in players. He's been unwell. He's had no strikers at various points during the season, and they are going and getting results at Napoli. And they played really well in that game, by the way. But let's look at the Napoli side of it, Lars, because there have been a bit of consternation on Napoli Twitter, it's fair to say. A few hashtag Conte out moments. And as well, they're trying to manage this situation with Romelu Lukaku, with his unauthorised absence from the team. Of course, he's had that really bad muscle injury that's been... He's only played 64 minutes so far this season. So what do you think of Conte's position, and what do you think of Lukaku's position as he comes back to training tomorrow?
That's the first of all thing with Conte. I'm almost a little bit surprised that he's still there in any capacity, because we know with Conte, he is an incredible coach. Like, he can work actual miracles as a coach. I think his record shows that. But he also has a pretty clear record of once things don't go to plan anymore, and once he loses focus a little bit and starts to become unhappy, things tend to spiral very, very quickly, and they don't tend to recover. And I thought we saw little hints of that in the autumn when you had important players missing with injury, results really not going their way. He was starting making some public comments suggesting that he wasn't very happy. Gotta admit, I thought, aha, the Conte cycle, here we go. But he has kind of reined it in again. And they look pretty much, I mean, it's really weird things have to happen for them to not get a Champions League spot. And I do think if you have that if you are a team that aspire to be a title challenger, but you have a season where in the first half you have a fair few injuries, things are not going your way. Okay, then you say, just make sure we don't lose our Champions League spot. We reload in the summer. We have a look at the squad again in the summer, and then we go again. But it looked like we were heading into this kind of contest spiral. What probably has irked the fans a little bit now is that he does seem discontent. He wouldn't be Conte if he weren't making little complaints to the media, and he also hasn't distanced himself from the Italy job, which has been it has been very strongly suggested that he could be the solution for them. Of course, they've done well under him before when they've had generations that were on paper not that strong, and he hasn't come out and said that I'm not going to do it. So there's maybe these little niggly things that make the fans a little bit unhappy, but all in all, I kind of feel like they've gotten through the season okay with everything that's gone on.
Talking of unhappy fans, we did promise you ructions in Rome, and what a strange week it has been for AS Roma. Of course, there's been a sense for a while that Frederic Masada, the sporting director, Claudio Ranieri, the special advisor, and a heck of a shadow to have over Gianpiero Gasperini, the coach, have been not exactly on the same page for a little while. That kind of blew up this week because Ranieri has not exactly been publicly defending Gasperini, saying his complaints about the signings are completely unfounded because we signed everyone he wanted. He signed off all these players. Also saying that Gasperini wasn't his first choice, or maybe even in his top 3 choices to be Roma coach. Then you had the fact they're playing Atalanta this weekend, Roma. That finished in a 1-1 draw, and a really missed opportunity for Roma in that game to not get 3 points, to totally cut away Atalanta and to close the gap at the top. Actually, we should just say, with Juventus's 2-0 win against Bologna tonight, and they had a beautiful tribute to Alex Manninger, their goalkeeper, former goalkeeper, who passed away earlier this week, of course, before that game. That means that Juventus are 5 points clear from Como and from Roma in 5th and 6th place. So where are Roma at, really, Lars? And is Gasperini's position sustainable, even?
Well, I think, first of all, it's odd that you have a head coach that we're having the conversation. Is the head coach's position sustainable because he's had a public spat with someone who is a special advisor? That's a very unusual situation. Or is he a
but
senior
not any
advisor?
old special advisor, right? It's Ranieri.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's Claudio Ranieri. But this is also one of the, Fabio Capello once said that a title in Rome is worth 10 in Milan or Torino or something along those lines. I mean, I guess this is part of the reason. It's one of those clubs that's, even though financially right now they can't really compete with the very best, there's a huge sort of cultural, they have a huge cultural footprint, and a lot of people care about what goes on at Roma. It's something that Mourinho, even if things weren't always brilliant on the pitch, is something Mourinho, to his credit, handled really well. Gasperini is kind of known for being a little bit cantankerous and a little bit difficult, and maybe he was better off being the head honcho of a more provincial club in Atalanta than having to do all the politicking that you might have to do at a bigger club. That was always the suspicion about him. And so far in the first season, he seems like he is struggling with some of that. He has said, Gasperini, this I thought was amusing. He said over the weekend, "This has been an extraordinary experience for me. We'll discuss it at the end of the season." So that sounds a little bit ominous. Maybe there's going to be a tell-all by unhappy Gasp towards the end. On the pitch, it's kind of clear what Roma's problem is. They haven't won a single game against any of the top 4 in the league. And in fact, if we expand that to the top 7, of which they're 1, but Atalanta, Como, Juventus, Milan, Napoli, and Inter, only 1 win. And they've played all the games they're going to play against those teams this season. Only 1 single win against teams that are 7th and above in the league.
It was always thus, wasn't it? It was always
they may still
thus.
make the Champions League, but it makes it really difficult when you keep losing points against the teams around you.
Yeah, it certainly does. And look, we've crammed so much into that first hour of Trans Europe Express that we're going to have to do our Stars of the Week for Serie A after the break, when, of course, we will come back with Mbappe Watch.
What's up, Benty? Andrew here. If you had to have a Royal Rumble style fight with all of your talkSPORT presenters, who do you think will come out on top and win?
I mean, straight away my brain went to Brazil. I don't think.
Talking about, can't even stand.
Mate, you. Sorry.
Mate,
are you? Do you what
are you talking
right?
about?
How are you throwing Brazil, him over the top?
You don't need to.
It's a Royal Rumble. You have to go over the top rope.
What, to get in it?
No. Right. A Royal Rumble is.
Yeah, I'm sure you can roll them under the bottom one.
The Royal Rumble rules are you have to throw them over the top rope.
I don't know if that's true.
Joe, am I lying?
So if you weighed a ton,
yeah,
you ain't losing it.
No, because but when you watch old Royal Rumbles like Yokozuna, for instance, it took about 6 men to throw him over.
I reckon you'd all team up and throw Brazil first.
No, I don't think you would.
Yeah, mate.
I don't think. I mean, Ade would take something.
He's the one.
No, because you can get him out. You could be tussling and you both go out.
You do what?
More green jackets have been lost at the 12th than at the Augusta City Dry Cleaners. Rory McIlroy knows this better than most. But what is Amen Corner and why is it so iconic? The famous sequence has always been there since the Masters began in 1934. It didn't get its name until '58, though, when American sports writer Herbert Warren Wint, on the left, wrote, "At the farthest reach of the Augusta National Course, down in the Amen Corner." He drew inspiration from the 1933 jazz song Shouting in That Amen Corner by the Dorsey Brothers. The reason behind its difficulty is all in the sand and the water. Tournament officials don't even bother to count the balls lost in there each year, such is the sheer number. The 11th, named White Dogwood, is a downhill 520-yard par 4 with a pond to the left of the green and a bunker to the right. Both cause a lot of trouble each year. The 12th, Golden Bell, is perhaps the most famous hole in the world, with danger everywhere. Many aim for the flag, but look, get it even slightly wrong, and you're in the azaleas at the back, or the bunkers at the front, or even worse, Rays Creek. Or you can play it safe and aim for the open green on the left. You chicken. Tiger Woods once said, if you make 4 bogeys from Thursday to Sunday, you're doing well. And the highest ever score on that hole? 13. It's a par 3. Tom Weiskopf in 1980 was the sorry soul. Often the iconic Ben Hogan Bridge is the only thing players enjoy about Golden Bell. Even if you escape there unscathed, though, you met with Azalea, the dogleg par 5 13th. It tempts players to go for the green in 2, but cut over those trees on the left at your peril. Every year, it seems, Amen Corner destroys someone's dreams. Rory McIlroy dropped 3 shots through here as his round unravelled in 2011. In 2016, a year after navigating Amen Corner expertly, Jordan Spieth shot a quadruple bogey on the 12th to throw away his green jacket. I mean, it sounds like my game, to be honest. So who'll be the next to be brought to their knees, praying for mercy after Amen Corner?
Back to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express here on the mighty talkSPORT. I'm Andy Brassel. Lars Sivertsen with me, fresh from his goal at the Parc des Princes in a losing battle for PSG. But that is all behind us, as is most of the first hour now. So much still to come. We're going to get into the Champions League. We're going to get into the Europa League. We're going to get into the Conference League as well. And, of course, we're going to have the great Tim Vickery joining us in hour 3. But now to Spain, where Real Madrid's season suffered a giant setback earlier this week. It's time for this.
Mbappe, Mbappe, Mbappe!
carrière le Paris Saint-Germain. Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go. Mbappe's in! Oh, Suso! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé. Allez, Kylian!
Yeah, Mbappe watch. And before we get into the week in the world of Kylian, we've rather overlooked, or I've rather overlooked, in that first hour to give you our poll. Of course, that's another TEE tradition here on Sunday nights. Our poll tonight is how many Champions League trophies will Kylian Mbappe win while playing at Real Madrid? Your options are 0, 1, 2, or more than 2. You can get at us at talkSPORT or text us on 81089. I'll ask you for your thoughts on that, Lars. I can save you the price for text. You can simply tell me face to face. But before we do that, let's go back to the start of the week. And what a strange week it's been. Of course, Wednesday night at the Allianz Arena, Real Madrid went there. They were 2-1 down from the home leg. And they made a really good go of it. And actually, this was the first time in a while that it felt as if we had not just a lively, but a fully fit Kylian Mbappe, reminding us of just the player he is, really.
Yeah, it was a brilliant game. And I mean, Kev touched about it when we were talking about Bayern in an earlier segment. Like they only seem to know how to go for it, Bayern Munich. It's like they are probably, I mean, you'd make them probably the best team in Europe, especially after that tie. But they don't sit back and defend. Like that's not a card. That's just not a club that's in their bag. Like it's something whether they don't want to or they're not comfortable doing it. I don't know. So this became a game where you knew they were going to try to hit them with Mbappe and Vinicius, but they still kind of played into that. And Mbappe had a lot of space to run into, and he was so dangerous. And for Mbappe, watched last week with Kevin, we kind of went through just how incredible some of his individual numbers are, and those numbers are unbelievable. But it could very well be another season with no major titles for Real Madrid. 2 seasons in a row for Real Madrid with no major titles. Reportedly, Florentino Perez came into the dressing room after that game and told the players, listen, this is not acceptable. You know, we can't do 2 seasons in a row with no major titles, but unless something really odd happens to Barcelona in the league, that's what we're heading for.
Yeah, reportedly, he asked Arda Güler to leave, so he didn't hear any of the criticism. So because it wasn't directed at him. I mean, I love that as a concept. Go outside, maybe watch an episode of Bluey or something like that, little man, because this isn't directed at you.
Like, he's young, but come on. He's 21 years old. Look,
the grown-ups have to have a bit of a talk. So why don't you go on, put the little blue headphones on, and you know, we'll pick it up in a minute, and maybe we'll go for a Happy Meal or something like that. Look, I think when we look at that Real Madrid performance, for me, they couldn't have done much more in that. I thought they were terrific. And of course, there are these reports of Eduardo Camavinga just absolutely inconsolable, crying and crying and crying after his red card, which really finished Real Madrid off at the end of that. I mean, I did think, as well as not the only Spanish governor in football to do this week, but Alvaro Arbeloa coming forward and saying, oh, look, this can't happen, this completely ruined the game, as if that was the only reason that Real Madrid got turned over, which I don't think is a fair sum up of it at all, especially over the 2 legs. But I guess as well, it's sort of underlined how rare it is these days that we see Real Madrid pull out a performance like this. That's what really struck me. I wasn't expecting anything like this from them. And we'll come to the Bayern bit of this later when we discuss the Champions League. But that front-footedness that gave Real Madrid the opportunity, Real Madrid still had to take that. And I thought it was great to see that they've got that in them, that they're not a simply reactive team. And they came to the Allianz Arena with this sense of, right, we're really going to get after these. Of course, the early Arda Güler goal really affected that as well. But they still come out on the wrong side of it. Now, we shouldn't really be thinking of Real Madrid as plucky underdogs. Let's go back to the poll question, Lars. Do you think, like, let's come away from the individual stuff. Is Kylian Mbappe going to actually win stuff at Real Madrid?
I think he will, and I think they will figure it out, because I do think he is brilliant. And I want to preface this by everything else we might say in the segment should be prefaced by the fact that he is brilliant. He's unbelievable. Yeah. And I think he will win stuff at Real Madrid. 2, I think he'll win more. I think he'll end up winning more than 1. But if you say more than 2, you're thinking 3, which is a lot of Champions League titles. Like he's 27. Let's 2 is a good number. Let's go for 2. I think for me in the poll.
Right.
For me, the big questions here are the season before he arrived. Vinicius was pretty much Real Madrid's best player. I don't think that's a very controversial thing.
Maybe the best player in the world.
And when we all said it. We said it on this very show that summer, I believe. They are bringing in Mbappe, yes, but he likes to take up almost the exact same positions on the field as Vinicius. So they're not bringing in him because he feels a need tactically in the squad or the group. They're bringing him in because they think he's going to be the best player in the world over the next half decade or so. Which might be true, but it still leaves you needing to solve this issue of how he's going to work with Vinicius, who's already there and is already brilliant. And 2 years in, almost 2 seasons into this experiment, I don't think they've found an answer to that, really. I don't think they have a definitive answer to how that's going to work. I also think it's not a coincidence that PSG have finally really fulfilled their potential and become last season, at least for a while, they seemed like the best team in the world. It's not a coincidence that happens when they kind of de-Galactico themselves. Like when you take away all these sort of unbelievable players who don't love running off the ball and suddenly they become this incredible collective that can't be stopped. I do think there's room. I think you can occasionally have players who are so good that you can afford to carry them a little bit off the ball. And I do think Mbappe is in that bracket, but I'm not sure you can have both Mbappe and Vinny in that bracket. It really limits you tactically in terms of what you could do. It gives Arbeloa some real challenges to figure out. And I think Mbappe will win things at Real Madrid, but I do think Vinicius Jr. might have to leave for this team to fulfill its potential with Mbappe as their focal point.
Yeah, it's a small amount of players that you can get away with doing no running off the ball. I mean, you're looking at, as you say, Mbappe, Vinicius, Icardi. That's pretty much it, really, isn't it? But I do think, I think the Vinicius Mbappe thing certainly tactically is a little bit overblown. I think you can find the way to play them in the same team. I think the bigger thing, I mean, clearly there's an ego thing, and it's really damaged Vinicius in that way, not being the top dog anymore. And, that's not insignificant. I think that's really significant. But tactically, I think the biggest problem is what it's done to Jude Bellingham, actually. Now, obviously, Bellingham has been carrying an injury for a lot of that time. And I think you saw the difference that he made in this game, by the way, and that it really can work. But I guess the problem is they've been traditionally a defensive team in recent years, haven't they? If you look at the run of Champions League wins under Zidane, when Diego Simeone openly coveted this set of players and said, well, at times I'd really like to be in charge of them instead of my lot. And then you look at Ancelotti, they're a little bit safety first a lot of the time as well. How they've been quite a reactive team for a lot of time. And actually, I wonder about this current set of players. Are they more comfortable on the front foot? I mean, I think there's a question on where they are in midfield. I still think there's a huge Modric-shaped hole in terms of organisation, because you looked at their midfielders once they signed Jude Bellingham, and you look at him, Camavinga, Valverde, and it's fine. They'll succeed without Kroos and Modric easily. But that's clearly proving not to be the case. Now, they're a bit of a mess defensively as well. But really, to me, it doesn't feel like the front part of the team that needs the tweaking. It's the middle and the back.
See, I'm not sure about that, because I think if you want to play front foot attacking football, if you want to play with a high line, you got to press. You have to, that's the thing you have to do, because you have to hassle the opponent so they're not allowed to stand in peace and put balls over the top of you. That's why if you have really fast guys who don't love pressing all the time as they have up front, then you kind of need to sit back and not leave space in behind you. So I think tactically it is, in my opinion, is a little bit of a challenge. I wonder if we're thinking about Bellingham's position, I do wonder if Arda Güler's emergence is a little bit of an issue for him in terms of what his role in this team is supposed to be. He had a lot of initial success at Real Madrid playing as an almost reserve attacker, being the guy who makes his way into the box and scores a lot of goals. That worked a lot better than I think anyone expected in his first season there. And then now that they have Vinicius and Mbappe playing up front, he's moving to a slightly deeper midfield position. It feels like he hasn't quite found his role there. And when Arda Güler is really emerging as the sort of creative fulcrum of this midfield, I think it's a case of Bellingham is an unbelievable player, and I'm sure he'll figure it out. And I'm sure either Arbeloa or the next Real Madrid manager will figure it out. But it's not immediately obvious like what role he's meant to have there. And for a guy who can do almost anything, that can be a bit of a challenge to find out.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the road back towards trophies is not a straight one for Real Madrid, so we'll see how it goes after the next little while. Look, I really want you to vote in this poll. I don't often say that, but I'm really fascinated to know what you think, everyone listening and watching. Just to reiterate, how many Champions League trophies will Kylian Mbappe win while playing at Real Madrid? 0, 1, 2, or more than 2 at talkSPORT, or text us on 81089. For my money, last thing's 2, I think 0. But let's wait and see.
0.
Remarkable, isn't it, to go backwards and think about what the future could be if they really were pressing. You might remember Roberto De Zerbi, when he was at Marseille, sat down Mason Greenwood, showed him some videos of Vinicius Junior, and said, this is what a star player looks like, pressing off the ball. Remarkable to think that's happened in the same decade as we are talking now. We'll be going to Spain next, here on Trans Europe Express.
Bring Klopp in for 12 months. Let Klopp be the manager and let Gerrard shadow him for 12 months. Let him learn from him.
What are you on about?
And then let Gerrard bring in his own team, because every Liverpool fan in the country, and I know the listeners to this now, would love Gerrard and Carragher on that touchline at some point.
Bobby, what are you on about?
You don't think it's happening?
It's extreme, but...
What do you mean it's extreme? Jurgen Klopp's not coming to Liverpool for 12 months to teach Steven Gerrard how to be the Liverpool manager. What are you on about?
That's not happening, Bob.
What do you mean, why not?
I think.
What do you mean, why not?
Things that have happened in football.
Do you think this is charity?
That have happened in football. No, but I think there's worse things that have happened in football.
Jurgen Klopp is not taking over Liverpool.
No, you ain't doing it.
No, I'm not saying on a permanent basis. I'm saying if he was shadowed.
Bobby.
Don't let Bob talk. Bob,
no, but Bob, we speak to you quite a lot, right? And you normally come out with some decent stuff, but that is absolute guff.
I don't think it is.
No, it is, mate. You're miles off it. You're miles off it. Jurgen Klopp's not going to turn up at Liverpool, come back for 12 months.
Trans Europe Express here on talkSPORT. Andy Brassel and Lars Sivertsen, and now we're off to Spain. I would say off to La Liga, but of course no La Liga games this weekend. They've all been put back to this midweek when they're in action on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. And the reason for that is we had the Copa del Rey final held in La Cartuja in Sevilla, joining the ranks, of course, of noble football grounds that you can watch from a hotel room, which is pretty good. You think Bolton, Blackpool, Seville, a wonderful sort of mix of, well, the first two, one of them is a seaside resort, at least. The other two, not so much. But I guess we were expecting, Lars, the fairy tale for Antoine Griezmann, as it was Atletico Madrid against Real Sociedad, him playing his former club and his last season with Atletico. Maybe this would be the chance for him to finish off with a trophy. But instead, well, it also started going wrong after 14 seconds, really, didn't it? When Real Sociedad took the lead, and they eventually closed it out after a 2-2 draw on penalties, just as they had in the Copa del Rey final between these two teams in 1987. And what a moment for Real Sociedad.
Really fun game of football, this, Andy, and that's not always the case with cup finals. But this was lively. Both teams really like having chances, a lot of energy, a lot of nerve. Like great game of football, and Real Sociedad held their nerve in the penalty shootout. Diego Simeone said after the game that the game was effectively decided by who took their chances. Now that's very clearly true in the shootout, but I think it's true in the game as well. Like it became not quite a shootout, but it was lively and both teams had chances. And I do wonder if that's when we're talking about Simeone and Atleti, that they've not... I think most people have been watching them in the Champions League this year have realized this is not, your dad's Atletico Madrid who are just kind of sitting back and destroying everything and defending. They don't really have that in them anymore. But that means they lose control over games like this. And what a moment for Real Sociedad, who had won a trophy recently, but it was during COVID. So it was with no people in the stands. They won the cup then. This felt like more of a real trophy for them.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's a little bit like Liverpool winning the Premier League last year, isn't it, Lars? The idea that, COVID trophies are, not worth nothing, but at the same time, it's not really the same if you're celebrating it in an empty stadium without your fans. And it felt to be that really emotional release for Real Sociedad and their players once they finally got this over the line. Let's have a word as well for the coach, Pellegrino Matarazzo, who's only been in charge a few months, took a charge of them when they weren't in a great place and they were on the edge of the relegation battle at the very least. And he's got them into a much better position in the league and now to cup glory. Now, bearing in mind that his last Bundesliga job was getting binned off by Hoffenheim, this is an incredible step forward for a coach who arrived in La Liga not speaking a word of Spanish, but has quite an interesting background.
Interesting background, to say the least. I mean, he grew up he was born in New Jersey, which is very unusual. I mean, he's from an Italian family, Neapolitan emigres to New Jersey. Grew up supporting Napoli, watching Diego Maradona play for them, and has made his way. Has made his way in the game. Spent a lot of time playing sort of amateur level football in Germany, and that's where he sort of got his career in coaching going. Actually shared a room with Julian Nagelsmann at the sort of German sports college he went to, which is quite a thing. So he ended up working with Nagelsmann later on as well. I have a special fondness, I think, for characters like this who kind of punch up, who don't go into coaching on the back of a very successful playing career, who then are in a situation where they know loads of people and people are happy to help them and give them jobs. He's had to really fight every step of the way just to get into this game. And for someone of his background to be successful in the Basque Country is quite something. But I think it's also interesting that Real Madrid take the plunge on him, Real Sociedad, I mean. Everyone knows, of course, that Athletic Bilbao have this strong policy of only having Basque players in the squad. Real Sociedad, for a long time, had no Spanish players, Basque and foreign players. They've loosened up a little bit there now, but they are a club that has an extremely strong local attachment. A lot of players from the academy in their squad and active in this game as well. But they also like bringing in some coaches from the outside, the odd player from the outside, to give it a bit of a mix, which I think is a really good model, actually, having a combination of this local connection and people from the outside. And when you see interviews with Pellegrini Matarazzo, it's clear that he understands this. He talks a lot about the region and about the culture and about not coming in and necessarily changing anything, but just bringing some ideas from the outside.
And talking of those players who are a mix of that, I guess Antoine Griezmann is one, isn't he? He came over from France when he was 14, going on 15 years old, to join the Real Sociedad Academy after a series of rejections in France. Fought his way up there, made his debut in the Segunda, and then went all the way to the Champions League with Real Sociedad before joining Atletico Madrid the first time. Now, if Atletico were heartbroken by this, and they really were, it was a choker for Antoine Griezmann as well, who's had so many plaudits of late, and quite rightly, notably from Diego Simeone, his coach. Couldn't quite really make his influence felt on this, even though he provided the pass for Ademola Lookman to score the first one. Bearing in mind what an influential player he's been over the years, particularly for Atletico and France, he's a World Cup winner. He's not got a lot of club trophies, has he? Is he just destined to have a bare trophy cabinet?
You know what? Before we started talking about this tonight, I hadn't really thought about it. But you are completely right, Andy. He's not won a lot of things. He's won the Europa League with Atletico Madrid. He's won a Copa del Rey with Barcelona. But he seems to have been at those two clubs. He's just kind of missed their more trophy laden eras, which is absolutely no fault of his own. We should stress. I mean, he has won a World Cup with France, but also someone who's been a glorious player. And watching him play for Atleti against Barcelona over those two legs. Starting to think, is it too soon for him to be leaving this stage? Because he seemed to be doing this thing that the great players do, is that he's altering his role on the field in light of his slightly diminished physical capacities. At the age of 35, he's not going to be this aggressive pressing striker who's snapping at the heels of the centre halves all game. He's not going to be a lightning quick winger who's bursting away from people. But he has, after he became more of an attacking midfielder, more of a playmaker, he's played that role magnificently for Atleti, and he played it very well for France when he was still part of the setup there. I think France really miss him.
Oh, they definitely do. There's no doubt about that. And I guess this is a question, like with Griezmann, even though he is not a first pick for Atletico all of the time anymore, they still need to replace him. It's a little bit like Luka Modric for Real Madrid. I realise, player for player, they're very different. But now, because Modric wasn't playing all the time, or he wasn't supposed to be playing all the time in his last season at Real Madrid, there was less of a sense of we need to replace him. Whereas really, we were thinking beforehand that Julian Alvarez, because he's the guy who likes to lead the team and he does tons of running off the ball, he's really the natural Griezmann replacement. I'm not sure he is,
No, he likes to take up some of the similar positions in the fact that he's a forward who likes to drop into the gaps between midfield and attack a little bit, Alvarez.
Yes.
But I don't think he pulls the strings in quite the same way. And I do think with Griezmann leaving, I mean, who am I to tell the Atleti recruitment department what to do? And possibly they're already looking at this. But certainly a midfielder who is someone who's happy to get on the ball, pull the string, set the tempo of the passing game, find some openings, play some risky balls forward. I mean, I think that's something they really need to think about this summer, because as much as we're used to thinking of Griezmann as a forward, that's really the role he's been playing for them, dropping into pockets of space, connecting the midfield and the forwards. And they don't really, I think Julian Alvarez it's not quite his game. I think he's quite a complete player, Julian Alvarez. Maybe give him a chance to play that kind of role and maybe he can grow into it. But I suspect a midfield purchase will happen for Atletico Madrid this summer.
Yes, and we should have a word before we leave this, Lars, for Unai Moreira, the reserve goalkeeper. Of course, we have so much of it nowadays. The reserve goalkeeper playing in the Copa. I think he's played 3-4 Liga games ever for Real Sociedad, and replaces Alex Ramiro in the cup team. And just as he saved them in the penalty shootout in the last 16, he saved the first two pens in this from another former Real Sociedad player, Alex Sorloth, and from Julian Alvarez. And what I really enjoyed about Moreira in this penalty shootout is a good example of what an influence Emi Martinez has had on world football, isn't it? And on world goalkeeping. What a pest he was.
He was. I think also I like it that they did it this way, Sociedad, that they stuck with them, because I mean, we've had a discussion about this in the UK, haven't we? After Arsenal's League Cup final, where Kepa didn't have a great game, and when it's all well and good having cup goalkeepers, but maybe when you get to a final, maybe you should consider putting in your first choice. But Real Sociedad, given from what we spoke about, it was a really important final for them. They don't get to many finals. It was a big moment for them, for the whole city. They stuck with their cup goalkeeper, even though he hasn't played a lot of football over the last few years. And it was so nice that choice was rewarded, both for them and for him. So I thought that was a lovely moment.
So well done, Real Sociedad, and well done, Unai Moreira, and well done as well for not doing the thing that Emi Martinez did with the trophy out in Doha. Maybe the Copa del Rey is a little bit too big.
It's a time and a place, Andy.
Yeah, there is.
That was the time and the place.
Yeah, they won't get to do it every year. That's for sure. Coming up on Trans Europe Express, we're going to be looking at the Champions League action from an incredible last week.
Am I right in thinking, Simon, Andoni Iraola, in the past, he's someone who's caught your eye? Down at Bournemouth, you've been impressed.
Can't not do, can you? I mean, he's done a remarkable job at times. I mean, predecessors of his did remarkable jobs contextually, but he's elevated it even beyond that. The style of play, the manner in which they put some of the biggest teams into their box. They've had players repeatedly sold from underneath them, and yet still managed to produce a talent pool. They've had players sold at the beginning of the seasons, players at the middle of the seasons, and yet the guy has worked the oracle. He started slightly tentatively, didn't he? Because obviously you saw the Gary O'Neill situation where he got bounced out of Bournemouth and everyone thought that was an injustice. This guy came in, couldn't win a game. Gary went over to Wolves. Wolves beat Bournemouth inevitably in that particular game, and everything was looking like a particularly dark day. But he's been brilliant for Bill Foley. Bournemouth's been brilliant for him because it's given him a passage into the Premier League and shown an opportunity to show his trade.
Yeah.
But he looks to me like a manager that's going in. Hawksby and Jacobs return from 1 p.m. tomorrow as they'll be joined by former Arsenal goalkeeper Jens Lehmann as they look back on Arsenal's 2-1 defeat at Manchester City today. That's the Hawksby and Jacobs show from 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. I might be there for a little bit as well, so don't miss it. Yes, it's Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express, and with me, Andy Brassel and Lars Sivertsen here, there's just a sense, really, Lars, that the kids have been given the keys to the sweet shop. Now, as it's past the witching hour of all our European games, of course, we had Juventus winning, we had Lyon's shock win at PSG earlier. I know you've got your eyes on other sports, and, you know, I've got the NBA on, I'm not going to lie. Phoenix Suns 63, Oklahoma City Thunder, the reigning champions 8-7 in the third quarter. And I know your appetite for a different sport was whetted by, can we call it your debut as the Norwegian Bob Bubka last weekend?
I mean, it was a great moment for me. I happened to be on here when Rory won the Masters last weekend. Right. As a keen hobby golfer myself, that was good. Though it was a bit of a battle during the last hour with the Masters on screen next to me. I can tell you, dear golf fans, that Matt Fitzpatrick, Sheffield's Matt Fitzpatrick, looks like he's going to hold on to his lead and win the RBC Heritage at Harbour Town. He is still 2 shots ahead of the challengers, which are Siwoo Kim and Scotty Scheffler. He's now on 17, Matt Fitzpatrick. So we just need to avoid any big boo-boos on the last 2 holes. And Fitzpatrick will claim what I would believe will be his 4th ever PGA win. And it's not a bad one to win either. The Heritage being one of the signature wins. So that's a $3.6 million prize money for the winner there. Not a bad one for Matt Fitzpatrick. 2 more holes to hold on for him to claim that.
Yeah, that is not to be sniffed at in any way, shape or form. And nor is being put up there in Sheffield legend, I suppose, alongside Jarvis Cocker and Def Leppard, which is pretty decent. That's probably the way to frame it. We're going back to the Champions League now. And let's start with the champions themselves on Tuesday night. We're going to look at Tuesday night's games first. Paris Saint-Germain, it looked pretty comfortable on paper as they won 2-0 at Anfield, knocking Liverpool out for the 2nd year in a row. They'd been very, very comfortable in the first game. Even though it was the same result on paper, very, very different second leg, though. No, Lars?
Yeah. Sorry. For the dear listeners might know, we're doing this remotely, and Andy did momentarily drop out there. We've had our first gremlin on the line. Just given how far we've gotten into the tournament for that to happen, I'm glad. Could you repeat, Andy?
Yeah, I was going to say it was a very different second leg to the first leg, despite the fact the score was the same. It was not as simple for PSG as many expected.
No, I think so. I came away from this game thinking, I felt, have we set the bar too low for Liverpool now? That, I mean, they lost 2-0, but I came away thinking they've done quite well here, actually. Because I just think PSG are such a nightmare team to have to chase a lead against because of all that pace they have on the counter. Like you have to, like if you're chasing a result, you are going to have to push up your defensive line. You are going to have to give space for Kvaratskhelia and Ousmane Dembele to run into. And that is a scary thing. They can hurt you in so many ways. And I thought, actually, Arne Slot's got a lot of criticism over the last few weeks. I thought he found a good balance here between making sure they didn't give PSG too much of a highway to hurt them on, whilst also pushing up and really going for it. And really, like, they could have, if they'd gotten a goal, well, at all, but certainly earlier in the game, they could have gotten something going here. But I don't think they embarrassed themselves at all.
Yeah, which is a definite plus. And of course, as you say, Liverpool looking set fair after this weekend to return to the Champions League, because fifth place is almost certainly going to be good enough, especially with the progressions of Palace, of Villa and Forest, all adding to that lovely Premier League coefficient, of course. Now, we've talked a little bit about Atletico beforehand. But before we get onto the Barcelona refereeing complaints as they went out of the Champions League before the final, again for the second successive year, around earlier this year at the quarterfinal. Firstly, this was an epic match. And secondly, with this having been an epic match, should we maybe have made Real Sociedad favourites for the Copa del Rey anyway? It's certainly understandable that Atletico had such a slow start.
It's a really good point. The physical and I think in mental exhaustion from this game will have been quite the factor. This was so entertaining. This was one. I remember having two screens up that evening and thinking I'm going to try to spend an equal amount of attention on both screens. But this was an absolutely delightful. It got almost into Barnstormer territory, I thought, just because again the tempo was so ferocious. And I do think. You might be tired of talking about this, Andy. I do think we have to talk about the high line from Hansi Flick here. The Hansi Flick
I'm not tired of talking about it. Bring it on. Bring it on.
Because listen, if Hansi Flick was here, which what a get that would be for the Trans Europe Express, by the way. But if he was here, I think he would say, "We won the league last season. We're going to win the league this season again. The tactics are fine," and it would be hard to argue against that. But it is an interesting sort of thing that there were certainly reports in the press earlier this year after Barcelona had lost 4-0 to Atletico Madrid in the Copa del Rey, that the players had a chat with him and said, "Listen, Hansi," I am clearly paraphrasing, but they'd said, "Listen, Hansi, this high line of yours, are there maybe some games where we can adjust this a little bit?" Now, over the two legs here in the Champions League, they end up getting two players sent off, both from balls in behind. And also the first goal they scored, because they start this game so well, making it 2-0. And you also wonder if Fermin, the chance he has when he nearly scores, but he still gets kicked in the face. If he had scored there, maybe this goes differently. But Atleti then strike back, and it is again a ball in behind that hurts them, both for the goal and for the eventual red card for Garcia. And Atleti, more than anyone, seemed to have Flick's number in this. And when the players themselves had been suggesting maybe they need to adjust it, is there some culpability with Flick here?
Well, do you know, I think he's actually responded to some of the criticism with the team he picked. I think it was noticeable that Gavi came in to play alongside Pedri. Now, look, in theory, it should work with Koundé at right back as well, because João Cancelo, he's completely unreliable in defensive situations. But when he goes, then it kind of becomes a back three, doesn't it, of Koundé, Garcia and Martin. But I guess this is kind of where Barcelona are, the fact that they have this... They have this kind of make, do and mend approach, particularly in defensive situations. Now, we know Hansi Flick can bring the best out of players and put them in different positions that they didn't know they can play and make them do it. And I think Gerard Martin is a really, really good example of that, actually. He's been fantastic when he's played at centre-back this season, having before exclusively played at left-back. But it is clear they need at least one more central defender this summer. And I think it's funny, really, when you consider how different their situation is and Real Madrid's situation, is that really they're kind of looking for the same sort of players going into this summer.
Well, I'm going to say something now that if you take it in complete isolation and you think only of the last couple of months and you clip it up and put me on the internet, I will look very foolish. But I'm going to say it all the same.
Scissors
I kind of
ready?
think Barcelona could do with Mickey van de Ven.
Right.
Because if you look back to the heydays of Ange Ball at Tottenham, they again were pushing like ridiculously high up the field and kept getting done on the counter. But so many of those chances were rendered non-chances by Van de Ven just appearing out of nowhere, having covered and just a mind-boggling amount of space in no time at all for a centre half. I think maybe not. It doesn't feel maybe natural for Barcelona to go hunting amongst the relegation battlers in England for defenders. But someone with that kind of pace, I think would make me feel a lot better about the way they defend if they had that. Because there's something about like all the money that gets put into this and all the incredible technical quality that's on display and all the analysis and everything that goes. The key moment ends up being a race, a running battle between Eric Garcia and Alexander Sørloth. That's very odd. I mean, that's like watching two super tankers have a race down the Suez Canal. Like it's a very weird situation that you ended up in. Listen, they're going to win the league, and they're incredible to watch at times. But I do think for the future under Flick, if they're going to keep doing this, they need a centre half with some legs.
Yeah, I tell you what, if we're talking of vintage Spurs and if we're talking of fantasy, which we kind of are because there's no way they can afford Van de Ven, even if Spurs go down, vintage Jan Vertonghen, he would have been great for this Barcelona. I really think he would have been. But of course, it will be begging, stealing, borrowing, and loads of trying to buy players that they can't really afford going into.
That's not something
summer,
Barcelona would do, surely, the begging and the borrowing. This is very unlike them to come up with like weird financial ways of affording things they can't really afford.
Well, look, in the meantime, Juan Laporta is still on this complaint about various refereeing things, his second in 2 weeks. And we will give that exactly the time of discussion that it deserves. 0. To remind you of our poll while we're on Spain, how many Champions League trophies will Kylian Mbappe win while playing at Real Madrid? 0, 1, 2, or more than 2. I know you want to come back at that, Lars, so we'll do that in the next section when we'll be discussing Wednesday's games, including that absolute barn burner when Real Madrid went to Munich.
The debate goes on, the hair pulling debate goes on because Manchester United, we now learn, plan to appeal against the red card given to Lisandro Martinez for pulling the hair of Leeds United striker Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Here's the thing, for the dismissal to be overturned, United have got to successfully argue to the FA that Paul Tierney made an error in sending Martinez off. Going to get Danny's take on this because this isn't going to finish yet, not anytime soon. Michael Carrick said this about the sending off and the incident.
Shocking decision to send Leach off. It's 2 games in a row we've had decisions like that go against us, but that one I have to say was one of the worst I've seen. So you can elbow Lenny Yoro for the first goal in the side of the head, leaning arm obviously, and then you can throw your arm in Leach's face, and then as he's off balance because of that, and he half grappling, and he kind of half touches the back of his ear, which then pulls the bobble out, which
Trans-Europe Express with me, Andy Brassell, and the great Lars Sivertsen. We're going to talk about Wednesday's Champions League games now. Now, of course, we have to start with Bayern against Real Madrid. What an incredible game it was. 6-4 on aggregate in the end to Bayern, 4-3 on the night. They accelerated after that Camavinga red card at the end. We're going to come and talk about the Bayern bit of it mostly in a minute, because that's what we haven't really discussed. But going back to the poll, Lars, you wanted to talk about Real Madrid briefly, didn't you?
Yeah, because Andy, I've been lucky over the years to do a lot of broadcasts with you, and I like all who listen, bow in awe to your knowledge and general sensibleness. It's not often you have a take that kind of stops me in my track, and I go, ooh. Ooh, and I think you predicting no Champions League titles for Mbappe at Real Madrid. That's a big one, Andy. That's a big one. And I have follow-up questions to that. And the first one is, do you think it's because Real Madrid, well, he will be there for quite a while and they will simply not win the Champions League? Like, he's 27 now. You'd expect him to stick around for 4 or 5 years at least. So do you think that's half a decade without Real Madrid winning the Champions League, or do you think he will leave?
I think it's somewhere between the two. So basically, I think they are nowhere near being able to win the Champions League at the moment, particularly when you look at the condition and the timeline of a lot of their major rivals. So PSG and Bayern are demonstrably better than them. Barcelona are closer than they are to being able to win the Champions League again, I think. Arsenal, despite what happened today, I think are in a good position to go again. And you look, there will be other Premier League contenders over the next couple of years. So I think we're looking at the next couple of years, because Real Madrid have so much work to do on their team, that I think that we are probably looking at 2-3 years where Real Madrid are not in the top 4 favourites for the Champions League. Now, that doesn't mean they can't win it. Of course, we've seen with Liverpool in 2005, with Chelsea in 2012, that sometimes you have a big club and arguably the weakest incarnation that they have in many years goes and wins the trophy. That's actually possible. But having said that, and, talking of the English teams, I think Manchester City will sort out their defence and get better in the near future as well. I think they'll be better next season than they have been this season, especially in a Champions League context. It feels to me that Real Madrid have got too much to do. So do they reach that point? Say if they went another 2 years without winning the Champions League, would they get to the point that no matter how many goals he's scoring, they think, can we actually get value for Mbappe? Well, maybe they do. I guess the question is, do they get to that point? Say they don't win the Champions League for the next 2 years and he's 29. Do they get to a point where they think, we can sell him again and get some money? Or do they have to think, right, we've got to double down on this so we don't look monstrously stupid for signing him in the first place?
I have a feeling they'll double down, because everything we hear suggests that this was very much a Florentino Perez driven thing, that he is, he thinks Mbappe is wonderful, that he's great. And I think that buys him more time. I think that the risk of him just actually going, hang on, I was actually wrong about that. That's a lot of weird stuff has to happen for them to get to there. I'm not sure they're that far away from being able to do it. But that leads us, I guess, into a conversation about the shortcomings they displayed in this game. I think there's a lack of maturity in this group. I would put it to you, Andy Brassell. I think there have been things that we've seen from Real Madrid in the last couple of years in terms of their behavior. And I don't want to go too much on my high horse here, because we got to understand these are extremely motivated, dedicated athletes who are very, very emotional and fired up when they're playing these big occasions. So people losing their heads a little bit at full time, okay, people complaining about the referees, I get it. But there is just stuff. Do you know what? I keep going back to the fact that they didn't go to the Ballon d'Or ceremony because Vinicius wasn't going to win it. Like, it's just a lot of childish nonsense. And this ongoing
campaign, the whole Xabi Alonso thing feeds into that. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
The campaign the club has waged against referees in La Liga, the idea that Xabi Alonso comes in and tries to tell them what to do and they kick him out of there instead. And listen, I'm sure you could argue it's an isolated incident, but Camavinga, on a yellow card, having recently gotten a yellow card, picking up a ball and clearly delaying the restart of play, which small children know is a bookable offence. And when he then gets that red card, which is richly deserved, everyone kicking off about it because he's very clearly committed a yellow card offence, but it's like they feel the rules shouldn't apply to them. Whether you think it's unedifying complaining about the referee too much or not, I just think it's a sign of not having a great mentality because you're focusing on something like there's something you can change in that situation, and it's not the referee applying the laws of the game. It's your own player not doing something quite so daft. Like, you got to be smarter, you got to be better, you got to be more mature. And that's on the mentality side of things. And I also just think when both Kroos and Modric eventually left the club, they are lacking a leader in midfield in terms of when to calm down and when to go, how to set the tempo. Like that technical leadership isn't quite there in that midfield anymore. So they seem a little bit, as much as they have incredible footballers in many positions, including possibly the best player in the world in Mbappe, there's a lack of leadership both technically and emotionally, I feel.
Yeah, I guess we're going back to the point about the midfield earlier, and we're kind of meeting in the middle, really, aren't we, Lars? The fact that we know they've got a lot of good midfield players, but, you know, have they got that calmness? And both Bellingham and Valverde, whilst being unbelievable players, are not about poise. And I guess nor are Bayern really about poise in so many ways. Vincent Kompany is the poise, but when we're watching this team, I mean, Kev was saying earlier how they're maybe the most likeable Bayern team for a generation or a couple of generations. They are so good to watch, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the thing I said in one of the previous segments about how they just don't seem to know how to sit back and defend. If you're a neutral, that's a good thing. Like this, you don't get a lot of dull games with these guys. I don't think they have it in them. I'm still kind of shocked by the fact that when they went 2-0 up at the Bernabeu, they didn't try to sit back and protect it, really. They kept leaving big spaces for Real Madrid to run into. But that's just how they go about things. They're a ball-playing team. And I guess it's one of those things, if you don't spend a lot of time practicing how to defend and keep a shape without the ball and sitting back, you're not necessarily going to be any good at it if you suddenly try to do it in a Champions League knockout game. So maybe stick with the things that you work on and the things that you do week in and week out in the Bundesliga. But it does mean those games are just never going to be boring. It's kind of trusting. It's a bit of an antithesis to a lot of what we've seen in the Premier League this season, where a lot of teams have become, in my view, a little bit too much safety first. And I did see this on social media, watching both the Barcelona Athletic game and this. There were so many observers who don't watch a lot of European football who were just shocked at, like, what are we watching? This is completely chaotic. But this is what it looks like when teams just think, yeah, we're just going to attack and we're going to accept that actually there will be some openings down the other end. And it was an absolute, just a classic to watch that way. And Harry Kane must be having the time of his life as well. Like, what an incredibly fun team to lead the line for in terms of the chances that come your way.
Yeah, and of course he contributes in so many other ways at the moment. I don't think he was really able to do the wider things in these two legs because he's just not really fully fit at the moment. And as we said earlier, maybe he's going to be back at that for the end of the season, for maybe the semi-finals and the final, if they get there, of the Champions League, and then for the World Cup, hopefully as well. But I guess what was really noticeable in this game, and it's something that came up again when Bayern played against Stuttgart today, is after that injury to Serge Gnabry, very ill-timed, and they've had a lot of ill-timed injuries this season, Bayern. Jamal Musiala coming in and looking like Jamal Musiala again, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also this is one of those things when you're talking about the time frame and the horizon and Real Madrid's path towards becoming the kings of Europe again. Bayern have had this season where they've been absolutely brilliant domestically, when they've looked like the best team in Europe, and they've done it with Jamal Musiala not really being a factor, and he's 23, and you're hoping, fingers crossed, he comes back from this injury and starts looking like his old self. Then you have a real match winner, someone who's going to be a superstar for them for many, many years to come. Such a good mix in this team as well, when you're thinking about the combination of players who are experienced, like Harry Kane, like Neuer down the other end, players who are young, who have energy, and players who are at the middle of their at the peaks of their career. Really, the squad building they've done at Bayern has worked out very well for them in this case.
Now, Kev and I only discuss this on Sunday nights because otherwise people think we're insane in the wider world. But we have made the argument for a while that Harry Kane is not actually Bayern's best player. How fitting is it that Michael Olise got the winner, and got the winner in a way like this?
You know, I am an instinctive contrarian, as you know, Andy, having worked with me for a long time. If a lot of people think one thing, my brain works the way it'll immediately try to think, okay, is there a different thing that can be true here? I definitely think Olise is kind of the natural heir to Arjen Robben as this sort of spectacular winger who wants to cut in and put the ball in the top corner, and people can see it from the International Space Station that this is what he's about to try to do, but that doesn't mean you can stop him, and it's an incredible thing to watch. And he has been incredibly impactful this year, and I hope he should be in the Ballon d'Or discussion, I think, at this rate. But I still think what Harry Kane does is so unique in terms of being a center forward who's both but one of the best finishers in the game, and someone who's a really good link player, and someone who is absolutely extremely low maintenance off the pitch. I don't think there's anyone like him. Whereas there are other good technical wide players who can score goals. That I feel like what Kane is more unique, and I do still feel, maybe not on this channel. I mean, this is talkSPORT, this is English media. Maybe he's not underrated here, but I feel like in the wider world, he is still a smidge underrated for me in terms of what he's done in his career.
True. Yeah, it is true. And it's also true that Arsenal are in the semi-finals where they'll face Atleti. Look, we've only given this half bar, in the words of Jay-Z, because of, well, it just wasn't as great a match as the Bayern Real Madrid one, which we'll be talking about, I'm sure, for years to come. But Arsenal did the job, and I feel that was important, especially with the fact they're having a bit of a wobble at the moment. Some people have been saying, why didn't Sporting come and have a go? I feel this is quite a disingenuous take.
No, I agree with you as well. And we're obviously speaking a few hours after this setback at the Etihad, which means, I guess, Arsenal are in full-blown crisis mode. But it's easy to forget that before this last period, they've basically had the best defense in Europe, pretty much. Yep. Like I would argue they've been the most sort of solid, most well-organized team around the continent. So as much as some things are going wrong for them right now, to tell Sporting, who are quite a lot better at home than away from home anyway, to just go to the Emirates and go for it, it is a heck of a lot easier said than done. Arsenal have some flaws as a team. Somehow the production in the attacking sense isn't what you need it to be. But you can't just go to the Emirates and take the game to them just like snapping your fingers. It's difficult. They're a very good team still.
Yes, of course. Brazil has given us the first Premier League team to have 3 Gabriels in the starting lineup of a game. And it's Brazil we will be going off to next on Trans-Europe Express.
Harry Maguire in a bit of trouble, or his mouth has got him in a bit of trouble, Simon. The Manchester United defender, of course, now hit with a one-game suspension. He misses the match for United at Chelsea on Saturday. The FA ruled that he swore at the fourth official, Matt Donoghue, following his sending off at Bournemouth last month. Maguire missed Monday's defeat to Leeds, serving the suspension for that red card, but he'll now be banned for an additional game. Now, on the language that was used, the FA's written reasons confirmed that the fourth official, Donoghue, claimed Maguire shouted as he left the field, "You're a joke. You're all an effing joke." Maguire insists he didn't insult the fourth official, instead claiming he said something along the lines of, "It's an effing joke." The independent commission sided with the fourth official. They actually asked for a 2-match ban, but in mitigation, which included Maguire's character, it meant they settled on 1. What's worse, Simon?
Or did they get a character reference from the people in Mykonos?
What is worse? Questioning the integrity of an official or swearing at them?
Context, isn't it? I mean, robust language is used. It's the manner in which it's used. We're all grown-ups, and this language that we see and hear, which some people are wallflowers about.
Who would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself? Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centerpiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967 when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93 when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in
Welcome back to Trans-Europe Express, third hour with me, Andy Brassel, and the great Lars Sivertsen. And now we're straight off to Brazil, where we've got Tim Vickery joining us from Rio de Janeiro, as at this time every Sunday. How are you, Tim?
I'm very well and looking forward to kicking the ball around with you and Lars over the next few minutes. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Yeah, we're good. And we're excited to hear your take on the Super Classico, because we're just coming to the end of River Plate versus Boca Juniors. Is that correct?
Final whistle has blown. Ooh. River Plate 0, Boca Juniors 1. So it's gone Boca's way. And you've got to remember in this is the biggest capacity stadium in South America, River Plate's. It's now something like 85,000. It's going to be even bigger. And Boca go into this without a single friend. No away supporters. So it really is, you really are into the Colosseum with that one. And you got to dig deep. And they did. And the man who won it, the man who is, I think, behind the recent great improvement in Boca's form, Leandro Paredes, who played it's on the stroke of half time. He played this delightful defence splitting pass, gorgeous pass to one of the strikers, Marencio. His shot was handled, penalty, up steps Paredes, no pressure, In it goes into the top left-hand corner, 1-0, and Boca saw that out reasonably comfortably, which is a fabulous win for them. They're just finding a little bit of form. They were dreadful a couple of months ago. They were playing with 2 wingers at the time, and it was leaving them all strung out. And there were Boca games when you were thinking, I don't think they're going to have a shot, let alone score a goal. They've switched it to a 4-man midfield. They're starting to look a little bit better, and that was a terrific win. For River Plate, very much in a period of transition after the disappointing second reign of Marcelo Gallardo. This was a first defeat for the new coach, Eduardo Coudet. Very disappointing, but there's a lot of young talent coming through. I don't think he's quite got a blend there yet, so he'll slink away to lick his wounds. Boca will be riding on this one, I think, for some time to come.
Now, Tim, we spoke last week about what was then the first week of the Copa Libertadores, but I remember you said next week, Lars, we will know much more. The first week was not the big one, but now everyone has played home and away. What has the second week told us?
Well, the second week has told us that it was a very, very good week for Argentina. Argentina have 6 teams in the competition. In the first week, they were 2-2-2. 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 defeats. This week, they all won. 6 victories, and one of them was extremely famous. Competition debutant, Independiente Rivadavia, from the wine-growing region of Mendoza. Plenty of reasons there to celebrate a wine or two, because they came up here to Rio, to the Maracanã, to play Fluminense, and they won 2-1. Now, that really is a famous victory indeed. So it was a good week for Argentina, and not such a good week for Brazil. Their 6 teams suffered their first 3 defeats in the competition, 2 of them at home, as well as Fluminense going down at home. Cruzeiro went down at home to a team from Chile, and it was a good week for Chile as well, who've had many bad years in the competition. Now, obviously, you can't win the Libertadores in the group phase; you can only lose it. Still, very early stages. One clear pattern we can point to: Colombia. What on earth has happened to Colombian football? Colombia has the biggest population in South America outside of Brazil, full of urban centres. Colombia has 4 representatives in this year's competition. Last week, all 4 of them drew at home. This week, all 4 of them lost away, not looking very good while they were doing it. And you can really see why, because a lot of Colombian teams are run as businesses, and all they want to do is sell players. So the teams are often a veterans parade. Last week I was watching Santa Fe, one of the teams from Bogota. The line is led there by Hugo Rodallega, 40 years of age, once, of course, of the Premier League. And almost everyone in the team is 30 plus. And you can see there why there's only one Colombian player in the national team squad, and that is the very much reserved goalkeeper, David Ospina, once of Arsenal and Napoli at the veteran stage, because Colombian football, all they seem to want to do is sell the players as quickly as possible. Mexico and Argentina have always been destinations. Now Brazil has really got into the act buying Colombians as well, and every sale is just weakening the Colombian domestic game further still.
Now, Tim, we've been doing this a very long time, you and I, on the wireless, and I can probably count the weeks on one hand that I haven't asked you about the Lyon-Brazil connection in some case. So look, I'm not going to finish a habit of a lifetime, particularly after, we spoke about it earlier, PSG 1, Lyon 2, big shock in the French capital, and a big game for Endrick in that as well. He got the opener set up by Afonso Moreira, then he returned the favour, set up the second, which proved to be the winner by Afonso Moreira. Now, after having had a bit of criticism for the first time in his spell in France, going back a couple of weeks, particularly when Lyon were on this endless run, he's really responded in the last couple of weeks. He was left out against Lorient last week, came on at half-time, was involved in both goals, set up the opener for Yaremchuk, and then was involved in the second one as well. And then he's restored to the starting lineup and does something. Now, these are his quotes from after the game. He was asked about Paulo Fonseca criticising him in public, actually, and then dropping him and saying, there's no problem with the coach. We discussed it. I'm never too annoyed by the choice of the coach because he has choices to make. I have to give the best response on the pitch. I wrap myself away in the work, which I think is a really refreshing thing for a star player to say. But before you get to that, Tim, with the injury to Esteval, this weekend, which we hope is not too bad, of course, and this return to form of Endrick, what does this do to the hierarchy of Brazil?
Neymar, to be honest, because if you try and do the 26, it looks to me as if it could boil down to a choice between one of those two. What tips it, in my mind, for Endrick's way is that he's so good off the bench. And you just mentioned him there, coming off the bench and changing a game. All of the goals that he scored for Brazil have been off the bench. Some players find that hard. He seems to find that very, very easy. The line there, the quotes that you gave me, don't surprise me, because one of the things he did at Palmeiras, he was always seeking out the experienced professionals to see what can I learn from them. And even going to Real Madrid, I'm not sure it was the right choice. He was going to a club that simply didn't need him. They just bought Mbappe, for crying out loud. But even then you're thinking, I'm sure this means he's got more experienced voices to listen to and to gain experience from. Now, while he is firing on all cylinders, Neymar, I think, is running out of time. I've just been watching him this afternoon, and Santos lost 3-2 at home to Fluminense, and he didn't do very much. In midweek, in the Sudamericana, which is the Europa League equivalent, they played a team from Paraguay, Recoleta, who essentially brought the reserves. And there was speculation that they were going to play the club president, who's 52 years old and has inscribed himself in the squad for this tournament. He didn't get a game in the end, but they did put out the reserves. And away to Santos, they got a 1-1 draw. And you're thinking, there is less than a month to go before the World Cup squad is picked. And he's not tipping the balance. And there is a media campaign behind him, and every good little thing he does, it's like, yes, get him back, get him back, get him back. Although there are others who say, no. He's very, very, very divisive. Most of the players, I think, wouldn't mind him being back. He's very popular in the dressing room. But I reckon if there's one player who's perhaps not entirely happy about the prospect of Neymar getting back, it would be Endrick, because as far as I can see, they're competing for the same place.
Now, Tim, last week we were remembering the life and times of the great Michel Lucescu and his work at Shakhtar Donetsk, among other places. Now, one of the players he had there was the Bolivian striker, Marcelo Moreno. Now, this was a long time ago, and I was kind of baffled to learn that he's still around. Mm-hmm. But I take it he will not be going to the World Cup with Bolivia, and I believe he's not happy about it.
No, and Bolivia won't be going to the World Cup. Yes, Marcelo Martins Moreno, he's now 38. He retired from football 2 years ago, but he came back this year. He's playing for free for a club in Bolivia, Oriente Petrolero. In order to get him back into the Bolivia squad, he is Bolivia's all-time top goal scorer, and they didn't pick him. And he's very, very put out by this. The centre forward that they went with, a fellow called Juan Godoy, is a veteran naturalised Paraguayan who spent years bouncing around minor clubs in Bolivia. So I can understand the frustration of Marcelo Martins Moreno, especially when you look at the game where the playoff that they lost against Iraq, they lost it 2-1. The corner count was Iraq 2 corners, Bolivia 16. So what they were lacking was penetration and goals. And last weekend, Marcelo Martins Moreno, he scored 2 goals in a win for his side. And he went ballistic afterwards. He dedicated his 2 goals to the Bolivia coach, who said, well, it's his fault that we're not going to the World Cup. He said, I deserved to have this chance to go to the World Cup, both as a player and as a legend, he said, but I'm not going, and the coach should be sacked because of it. So he's not very very happy. But it does shed light on dilemmas that almost all the South American coaches have going in to the World Cup. What are we going to do with the veterans? Luis Suarez, who retired from international football a couple of years ago, spitting blood at Bielsa, has now said, well, if my country need me, I'll come back. I'm ready. I'll come back. There is, of course, the case of James Rodriguez. He's hardly getting a game. He came on in the 90th minute. I think that might be his first league appearance of the season for Minnesota. And the Colombia side is built around him. There is, of course, Lionel Messi at Argentina, who it's going to be his decision, but he hasn't yet confirmed whether he's going to be playing the World Cup or not. I think he certainly will, but we haven't heard it from him. And, of course, there is an all roads lead to Neymar. So this what do you do with the veterans was a decision where the Bolivia coach went one way, we will see what way the other South American coaches go in the next few weeks.
Yeah, the Messi question's a really fascinating one. When I was away from the show last week, Tim, I was in Miami, and I know we all know what a cultural icon Leo Messi is, but really how he's grabbed not just the football community, the soccer community of Miami, but just the cultural agenda in Miami in general. You see him painted on walls, in murals, on pubs, everything else. I came away from that experience, and there's a lot of a World Cup push going on around the city of Miami at the moment. It's going to be a hard sell, like, to maintain that sort of momentum if Messi doesn't go. I'm not even talking about Argentina. I'm just talking about the World Cup as a whole now.
Right. And in that line, I think it's very bad news for Argentina that Atletico Madrid have qualified for the semi-finals, because Julian Alvarez is so important to them. And he makes Messi viable in the national team. And if he runs out of steam, if he's overplayed and he runs out of steam, then that is very, very much a serious blow, I think, to Argentina. I trust you had a good time in Miami. And
unfortunately. So it was a weekend in the Isle of Wight for him. But look, we prefer sunnier climes on this section. You always bring the sunshine, Tim. Thanks as always. We'll speak to you again next week.
Look forward to it. Cheers.
Yeah, Tim Vickery, there he goes. The great Tim Vickery, and Danny Kelly's Trans Europe Express would not be the same without him. We are going to concentrate on the World Cup next, talking of Miami, the United States, Mexico and Canada. And we'll be doing a World Cup focus on Portugal.
I'm enjoying Britain's Got Talent. Are you more into? You've not hit your golden buzzer yet, have you?
No, I have. I hit it for Rafferty. Yeah, I hit it for Rafferty, 16-year-old boy who gelled music and magic together. It was really sick.
And like the last one, I watched one last night. I thought it was recording. The choir at the end were very good. The kids from Wales.
Yeah,
very good.
We did the whole 6-7 thing. Do you even understand what that is?
You get some numpties on there as well.
Oh, you do, but
what about the guy with the Scotch egg? He wants sectioned.
Make sure to tune in for talkSPORT's Extra Time with Paul Ross later this evening, as you'll hear an exclusive interview with former Southampton and current LA Galaxy centre-back Maya Yoshida. I'll be tuning in for that one. That's talkSPORT Extra Time with Paul Ross from 1 a.m. Now, the clock is counting down towards the 2026 World Cup. We'd like to focus on the Portugal national team, Lars, because they're an interesting one, aren't they? I mean, I think most people would agree that the group of absolute favourites is perhaps Spain France, maybe England in there. But I think what makes this different from other World Cups is there's no one heavy favourite, is there? I mean, I've not even mentioned Brazil or the holders, Argentina there. It feels quite a level playing field. Do you think this represents an opportunity for Portugal with all the talent that they have?
I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. I definitely think, and Tim would back this up, of course, if we still had him on the line, tournaments outside of Europe tend to favor the South American teams a little bit. And you would think the fact that you're expecting quite a lot of heat in some of this, but then that comes up against the fact that I don't feel like those teams are in a good place right now. I mean, Brazil don't seem to be in a very good spot currently. Argentina have some pretty big question marks over them. So that does make you think, okay, so it's the Europeans. But yeah, I think I don't disagree that this is a World Cup that doesn't feel like it has someone's name written on it already. And Portugal have gotten a pretty decent group, and they certainly have. If you just go through the list of names, there's a lot going on in this group. Like, there's a lot of good stuff here. They would seem to have a lot of the tools you'd want to have in a team that can go deep into a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, if there's an advantage for them, it's that just as they were 4 years ago, they're closer to being a Bruno Fernandes team than they are to being a Cristiano Ronaldo team. But I would be very surprised, having said that, if injury notwithstanding, the 41-year-old captain did not start the opening game against the Democratic Republic of Congo. So where does this leave Portugal? Because I know from your perspective, you feel that Ronaldo starting will be a huge block to them really doing anything in this tournament, as it was to an extent in Euro 2024.
Yeah, and in the World Cup in 2022. I think it's hard to overlook his goal scoring record in qualifying. I think that's fair to say. It's also hard to overlook the fact that he did turn up in the Nations League final, scored in the final against Spain, scored in the semifinals against Germany. So it's not entirely accurate to say that he can only score against poor opponents. You know, that doesn't fully hold up. But I do think, again, we talked about it a little bit on the subject of Mbappe and Vinicius at Real Madrid earlier in the show. If you are going to have a player in the team who does no work off the ball to speak of, that player has to be incredible to justify that. Like that player has to be a reliable game changer, someone who completely changes what you can do with the ball, someone who completely changes your chances.
And not historically incredible.
Yes, but also currently, like this is where, with the Euros, where he was goalless, and the World Cup in Qatar where he scored one, fresh in the memory. I feel like there are very strong indications that his time has come and gone at that level, and that when it comes down to it, I'm not saying in the group stage game, the group stage games for which he should have been banned for 2 of them, by the way, very, very strange. And honestly, if I was Moises Caicedo or Nicolas Otamendi, who are also banned for the beginning of this tournament, I would go, hang on. Why has my ban not been overturned? Am I not famous enough? Do I not have enough Instagram followers for FIFA to randomly take away my ban? Anyway, he will be playing in the group stage. And I think it's entirely possible that he notches up some goals against the Democratic Republic of Congo, against Uzbekistan, or even against Portugal. Yeah. But my questions are, when it comes to the knockout games, when you're facing stronger opponents, and you're going to need all 10 outfield players to put a shift in, I do think it is a drawback to have someone who can't, and it's unrealistic to expect for him at his age to be pressing all the time either. I'm not sure that is a strength.
I guess this is the question: how much can you surround him with legs? And that was really what Argentina cracked at the last World Cup. They found a way to compensate for Messi's lack of physicality, and of course Rodrigo de Paul was a huge part of that. Julian Alvarez was part of that as well. I guess the question I would ask is, where are the alternatives for Portugal?
Yeah.
Because I think you're right. You go back to 2022, their best performance of the World Cup 3.5 years ago was that one that didn't include him in the last 16 game against Switzerland, in which they are absolutely brilliant, in which Gonçalo Ramos came into the lineup and scored a hat-trick. But I think you look at the fact that Gonçalo Ramos doesn't play that often for PSG.
No.
Of course, you could say that makes him a viable alternative because It means he's not completely cooked at the end of a long European season, but he's certainly not progressed in the way that we would expect him to. And, you know, that's even more so the case for João Felix, whose career has completely drifted at the age of 26, who was meant to become one of the best players in the world. I thought it was notable, actually, in the last round of friendlies, which Portugal did play in the United States, of course, is that they called up Paulinho, you know, who's really an honest worker of a centre forward, 5 caps, 33 years old, formerly of Sporting, and now playing his football at Toluca in Mexico. And I guess that says that, you know, Portugal are back maybe to the position that they were several years ago, where they have loads of great attacking players. And, you know, you look at Francisco Conceição, you look at Trincão, players who aren't necessarily in the 11, but can certainly do something off the bench. Are they left where they were 10 years ago with tons of wingers and not the elite striker who's going to finish it all off?
No, I think you raised a very good point. I think if Gonzalo Ramos had nailed down a spot at PSG, then this conversation would probably be different. But he's only started 11 games in the league for them this season, and is very much an impact sub, which he has been for his whole time at the club. Really, he starts some games in the league, but mostly he's someone who comes off the bench. I wonder if, and yeah, I also want to say, as much as I'm a little skeptical of Cristiano Ronaldo at this point in his career, gotta admit, like, if you're pushing for a goal a couple of minutes before full time, and you got crosses going into the box, who do you want rising to meet those crosses? Do you want Cristiano or do you want Gonzalo Ramos? Like, oh yeah, fair enough. You can sell me on that. You can sell me on that, Andy Brassel. The point I might want to make is, you know the dynamics of the squad better than I do. You've covered Portuguese football very closely and the national team very closely in your career. Would Cristiano Ronaldo accept starting not every game, but a few games on the bench this summer? Because I can see a version where, again, you definitely start to give him a chances to score some goals in the group games. That means a lot to him. But then when you get to the knockouts and you get stronger opponents, could you tell Gonzalo Ramos, listen, Gonzalo, we want you to chase defenders and harry them and press them and disrupt their build-up for 60, 70 minutes. And then when they're a little tired, we're going to bring on Cristiano to try to knock in goals towards the end. Like, is that kind of situation? Do you think he would accept that?
You know what? I think he would for the right coach, but it seems to me that Roberto Martinez has completely ducked that. Really, when the status or the statuses of different players in Portuguese football is changed to the extent that I think he would accept that, and he would have accepted that. And, you know, now it's not necessary to say, like, it's something religious that Cristiano is the best in the world all the time anymore. It's not necessary for people to say that. People know that Ruben Dias is incredibly important, that Diogo Costa is important, that Bruno Fernandes is important, that there are so many other players who can do it for them, you know, Bernardo Silva, that they are the keys and the heart of Portugal. But I think that's been the biggest disappointment, really, of the Martinez reign, that he had the opportunity to make Ronaldo a little bit more marginal and, you know, use him more wisely. And I don't think he's really taken that at tournaments, which I think is a concerning thing from a Portugal perspective. But look, we'll wait and see. I think really he has to be given the opportunity to do his best. And I think playing him for every single minute, whatever you think of Ronaldo and whatever you think of Ronaldo and where he is at the moment, I personally think playing him every minute doesn't give him the opportunity to be his best as much as anything else. And I think really it needs a stronger manager to do that. As I might have told you last, my theory is that after this World Cup, which Portugal won't win, Roberto Martinez goes, is replaced by Mourinho, and Mourinho is the man to shoot Bambi.
And I believe I've been on a broadcast with you before when you've said this, and I feel like it is my duty to point out that nobody shoots Bambi in the film. It would be a very, very different cartoon. It's very much Bambi, a close, without spoiling Bambi for everyone, it's a close family member of Bambi that has a bad time. If they make a remake in which they actually shoot Bambi, I'll watch, but that'd be a very different kids' film.
Look, to do the numbers on YouTube, you've got to do some crazy stuff these days.
Yeah, no, we can get people's attention. Listen, we talk a lot about Cristiano, but there's so much good stuff in this team. This might be a quiz. That might be a poll for a future episode of the Trans Europe Express. Is the Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, Vitinha trident the best central midfield in the tournament?
Well, I think it is, but they've got a bit of a problem here because, as we said earlier in the game in Paris this evening in PSG versus Lyon, Vitinha limped off. It didn't look fantastic, to be honest. He took his boot off in the tunnel as he was walking down the carpet in the tunnel at the Parc des Princes. This was the quote from Luis Enrique when he was asked about it afterwards. What's the news about him? He was asked, and he said, "It's nothing positive, that's for sure. When you're obliged to change a player like that before the break." We're going to do some tests and then we'll see. But it seems his ankle has been damaged and they're going to do an IRM on it tomorrow. So maybe that will change things. And maybe that would be to the benefit of someone like Samu Costa, who gave a really good impression, the Mallorca midfielder, when he was in the last couple of friendlies, and might have put João Palhinha down the pecking order a little bit. Of course, he's not had the greatest season at Tottenham. Now, we will be going on to the Europa League and Conference League next, where the English clubs will hopefully do a little bit better in the next part of Trans Europe Express.
When PSG decided to go and score, they went and scored 2 goals. And I look at Frimpong, that's a signing that hasn't worked. He's not good defensively, and he's not good going forward.
It's amazing, isn't it, the downgrade of the 2 fullback areas after last year.
Yeah, I'd still back Kyrgios to come good. I saw enough at Bournemouth to suggest there's a player in there, and I'm surprised with his personality how much he seems to have struggled with the weight of that Liverpool shirt. But then it's been a season of struggle for his more established teammates as well. It's a huge summer, isn't it? We reported yesterday that Richard Hughes, the sporting director, is going to stay despite interest from Al Hilal over in Saudi Arabia. But they need a lot of players, and I'm just seeing there, Joe Gomez is injured again. You can't rely on him to stay fit. Do they move on from Alexis McAllister, who's in the last 2 years of his contracts? Curtis Jones, I think, was keen to move to Inter Milan in January. Does that rear its head again? What do they do to replace Mo Salah and Andy Robertson? These are big decisions that
Ekitike out now for probably 9 to 12 months.
Yeah, and when is he going to be fit for next season?
Exactly. And Isak, yeah, has had injury problems, hasn't he, during his career?
Trans Europe Express here on talkSPORT. We've done the Champions League. We're going to go off to the Europa League and Conference League now with Lars Sivertsen. And Lars, we're normally looking for a reason as to why an English club won't win the Conference League. How can they avoid winning the Conference League? But firstly, we'll come to the Conference League in a second. And secondly, that's a more pertinent question for the Europa League, isn't it, after this week's results? Now, of course, we know that one of those English teams will get knocked out because there's a semi-final between Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest. But I think the good news for both of those teams is the amount of biggies that have fallen since we've been in the knockout stage. So let's look at it. Lyon, Roma, Celta went this week. Stuttgart, of course, Porto were knocked out by Nottingham Forest. It was hard work, but they managed to do it. It's a brilliant opportunity for one of these, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is a final against either Freiburg or Braga to win the Europa League and get into the Champions League. You would have taken that at the start of the season, to put it mildly. I think that's a very good outcome for them. Freiburg are they're a potentially dangerous opponent on their day. They've got some very decent players, Freiburg, but it's still it's I was about to call it a weak field, but I don't know if I'm actually comfortable with that phrase, because the reason it's like this, one of the big reasons it's like this is, of course, because they've changed the Champions League, because we're not seeing clubs from the Champions League getting dumped into Europa League. Was it Sharks that Mourinho used to call them? The Sharks that come into the Europa League? And on balance, I do think that's a good change. I do think, like, for teams, some of them have maybe gone through the qualifying rounds and through the group stage, and then you get to the knockoffs and suddenly someone gets dumped in from a different tournament and they don't really want to be there. I feel like that kind of cheapens the whole thing a little bit, but it does lead to a tournament where there are fewer of these mega teams with mega budgets. Maybe fewer blockbuster names on the card, but maybe more sort of authentic fun and intrigue.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And, that is kind of part of a European competition, isn't it? And the reason that those big teams have been knocked out, as we underlined before, they've been knocked out fair and square. There's no doubt about that. I think the one thing you could say, and I guess the Villa Forest semi-final brings it into some sort of stark relief, is just the way that the bracket's gone. You've had a lot more good teams in one half than you have in the other half. But say Lyon weren't able to take advantage of that. Celta weren't able to take advantage of that. And I think we should focus a little bit on Freiburg and Braga, as you were saying, because these two teams who no one fancied have done really, really well to get here. Let's start with Freiburg, because they won 6-1 on aggregate against the Celta Vigo side, who might end up in the Champions League next season. A Celta Vigo side that I really like under Claudio Giraldes since he took over from Rafa Benitez. They're super fun to watch. And Freiburg knocked them off with ease.
Yeah, they did, Freiburg. And I'm glad that Freiburg are still going strong. We've kind of gotten used to Freiburg being on the top half of the Bundesliga, being in European contention, but that was a huge story when it first started happening. They're not one of these giant German clubs with like 60,000 at every home game and most of the fans. They're a smaller club, very well run club, very smart, very canny club. I think, like a lot of people, I wondered what was going to happen to them when Christian Streich finally retired and called it a day. He was in charge of them, of course, from 2011 to 2024. An incredible run of being the Freiburg boss. And he really felt like he was such a larger-than-life character as well, and felt like he really was the heart and soul of that team. But under Julian Schuster, they've seemed to have, continued in much the same vein, and as a club, they really have a knack for finding young players who are motivated, they know who they are. They know they're not going to pick up the most talented players around Europe that all the scouts want. I think it was Streich who said something about, give me, hardworking young boys who are crazy about football, and we can do something with them, and that seems to be very much the thinking. So they're a very likable team, Freiburg, and I'd be very happy to see them in the European final.
Yeah, and I would say the same about Braga, but of course we've seen them in a European final in the last decade and a bit. Now, of course, I spent a lot of this week thinking about André Villas-Boas, as I spend many weeks thinking about André Villas-Boas. But of course, if Porto had gone through against Forest, and they weren't a million miles away, despite being down to 10 men for 82 minutes plus stoppages, it would have been a remarkable achievement if Porto had gone all the way in this competition, because I think that André Villas-Boas would have been the first guy, especially under 50, is remarkable, to have a season where he won the Liga and the Europa League, both as coach and president, which would have been pretty remarkable when you think about it. But of course, when AVB did win in Dublin with Porto in 2011, they beat Braga in the final. So again, like he was saying with Freiburg, Braga aren't any strangers to European competition. But this was one of the underrated achievements of the week. They drew the home game against Betis. They went away. They were 2-0 down in the first half hour, and Betis looked like they were running riot. And then they come back and win 4-2 in what is an absolutely jaw-dropping result in a place that has incredible atmosphere at La Cartuja, which they brought from their normal stadium to their temporary home in Heliopolis.
Yeah, and were you surprised, Andy, when Braga beat Betis? Because Betis have got some, as a more I don't watch the Portuguese league as closely as you do, but Betis are a decent team. They've got some good players in there. They've got an experienced, canny manager in Pellegrini. Kind of thought they were going to do this.
Yeah, same, absolutely. And I think it's a far from exceptional Braga side as well. The one thing you would have to say is they do have that bit of experience. You look at João Moutinho, even though he didn't start this game. Ricardo Horta, who's their captain, who scored and assisted. They've got Florian Grillitsch, who had a great Bundesliga career before it sort of went a little bit awry from him. So you have quite a nice mix of experience and of youth as well. But bearing in mind that they didn't have Ricardo Salazar, who I think is their best player and steps up at the big moments for them as well, is pretty incredible. We should probably have a bit of a word about Porto, their near neighbours in Portugal as well. I mean, look, Aston Villa swept aside Bologna pretty easily, and I think they would have beaten Roma as well, but Roma would have provided them a tougher test. But how much will Porto be kicking themselves that they weren't able to get past Forest, and particularly they gave away that equaliser with that Martin Fernandes ridiculous own goal in the first leg?
It's just really bizarre. Absolutely the architects of their own downfall here, Porto, clearly with this ridiculous own goal in the first leg. But also, picking a Jan Bednarek picking up a clumsy direct red 8 minutes into the return leg. I mean, I still think Francesco Farioli, having not watched Porto every game this year, to put it mildly, but everything I see from him and the teams he's been in charge of suggests that he is one of the sort of young European coaches to watch, that he is someone who's going somewhere. But from the coach's perspective, whatever you've done this season, coaching, tactically, how you set up the team, if you got one defender kicking the ball into his own goal for no reason in the first leg and another kicking someone in the head after 8 minutes in the return leg, there's not a lot you can do about that as a coach. It's just a very frustrating situation for him to be in.
I think the answer is wear shiny shoes in every situation, whether it's a suit or a tracksuit. Make sure you wear very shiny shoes.
Very briefly, your Braga knowledge obviously surpasses mine, but I did want to mention one of the things Braga do have. They have a Swedish defender, Gustav Lagerbielke, who is, I believe he's 6'4". And the thing about him, which listeners should know, Gustav Lagerbielke will probably play for Sweden in the World Cup as well. He is descendant of Swedish nobility. He is of Swedish noble blood. So he is technically a baron. He doesn't use the title. He doesn't insist that teammates refer to him as Baron Lagerbielke, though, I mean, I guess he could. And I believe he actually had the family crest on his socks when he was younger and playing, but I don't think he'd probably get bullied too much in the Braga dressing room for that.
What are we saying? Swedish Gibril Cisse. I like that. Well, I think if we're talking about inheriting royalty, we should probably move on to the Conference League. We haven't got as much time as we'd like, but touch on Crystal Palace. Do they inherit the likelihood of winning the Conference League from Fiorentina? Of course, Fiorentina in their last 4 years, 2 finals, a semi-final that they lost in extra time against Betis last year before they lost in the final against Chelsea themselves, of course, and now going out against Crystal Palace. And for a little while, when Sharon Dua put them 2-1 up in the second leg, they looked as if they could make it uncomfortable for Palace. But is this the moment where Crystal Palace sort of came of age in European football?
Maybe. So I'm very much in two minds about this, Andy. because I am of the opinion, and I'm going to keep banging this drum whenever I have a chance to do it. I don't think the English team should be in this tournament. I don't think the teams who make hundreds of millions in TV money every year has any business being in the European Conference League. The league was invented, it was started so that teams from smaller football countries who don't have that kind of strong economic model, teams from countries who see any player who show any kind of talent be sold abroad immediately, like the situation Tim described in Colombia earlier in the sentence. I mean, I grew up in Norway. Any Norwegian team knows if they have a good player, he's going to go in the next transfer window. Like, this is the reality for most leagues around Europe. The European Conference League was started so that clubs from these leagues can also have a European run, can also have a European adventure. And I don't like seeing it that we, year after year after year, we have the team from England with hundreds of millions in TV money coming in, always go far in this tournament and win it a couple of times. Having said all of that, I kind of struggle to think of a Premier League team I owe this run more to than the Crystal Palace. Anyone who's been to see a Premier League game at Sellers Park, like, their fans make a tremendous atmosphere. It's one of the great atmospheres in English football. They're the home fans there are really passionate. They are also an example of the kind of club that would normally not experience a European run because they're up against financially superior opponents. Now, in their case, it's domestically. So, like, in principle, as a foreigner from a small country with a small league, I don't like seeing the mega bucks of the English Premier League do well in this league. But I have to say, the Palace, I'm kind of happy for them that they're getting to experience this as well, the fans.
Yeah, and it'll be a fascinating semi-final against a very young Shakhtar team, but capable Shakhtar team. Of course, the other semi-final, Rayo Vallecano against Strasbourg. Both fascinating stories that we'll get to in subsequent weeks. But hasn't Gary O'Neill done well there to get them to European semi-final in his first year in charge, and quite an explosive quarter-final against Mainz as well, where Greenwich's own Marshall Godo started a ruck quite inadvertently. But again, we'll get to that in subsequent weeks. GON will get his credit. There's no doubt about that. We're going around the other leagues next to finish off tonight's Trans-Europe Express.
Placed Tottenham Hotspur, very much down there and scrapping in the relegation zone. Tottenham fans reportedly have called off plans for another pre-match parade to welcome the team bus before Saturday's home game against Brighton.
Last time, didn't it?
Well, yeah, this is all to show a bit of passion and fervour. We're right behind the team, etc., etc. But apparently they're calling it off. A statement by the organisers of Show Up, Sing Up, Stay Up campaign said they were disappointed at calling it off, but they support whatever Roberto De Zerbi sees fit in order for his players to have the best possible preparation. Apparently, De Zerbi decided his players will arrive at the stadium earlier and not by coach, so that they avoid fans lining the pitch, as we saw pre the Nottingham Forest game. Is he right, De Zerbi? Do you think? Is he taking the temperature down a bit?
Well, I assume he's got method to his madness. I mean, ultimately, the last time they did the show up, stand up, or whatever it was, didn't work so well, did it? They got beat 3-0 by Nottingham Forest. So I'm not so sure it's been proven to be something that has a proof of concept behind it.
Yeah.
The fans will be behind the players inside the stadium. Now, bless their little cotton socks. Maybe they don't need to be told how important it is to the fans, because it's only important to them, isn't it? Maybe that's part of the thinking. But De Zerbi is obviously trying to manage the game with the best intentions of making it as normal as possible, not heighten the expectation upon the players.
Here we are, last knockings of Trans-Europe Express with me, Andy Brassel, and Lars Sivertsen. And this is the bit where we go around the leagues. I've got to be honest, it's my favourite bit. And not least because this week I've renamed it Icardi Watch. And you know why I've renamed it Icardi Watch, Lars? Well, one, because ever since we first have Messi Watch, I have been aiming to set up a rival stroke replacement Icardi Watch to cover the great man. Danny's not here, so he can't stop me at the moment. Look,
and I don't have the juice, Andy.
I can't wait for you to come back as soon as possible, Danny, but you can't blame me for being a little bit mischievous as well. Look, big weekend for Mauro Icardi and for Galatasaray, I think it's fair to say. 64 days without a goal for the iconic striker who of Galatasaray, who is no longer first choice with Victor Osimhen out. But even with Victor Osimhen out, with that broken arm that he sustained in the Champions League, Maurito hasn't been getting a game. It's been Barış Yilmaz, who's been playing up front as well. We were talking about strikers and efforts they put in or don't put in off the ball and whether they're necessarily capable of that as well. Look, they realised they needed some goal power for this week, and it's clear to see that they took a big choice in starting Icardi for this game. Glenn Cherbury this weekend, and they were rewarded. Icardi opened the scoring after 70 seconds in this. And I wonder if they were prepared to be a little bit more front foot, Lars, because Fenerbahce, in what was almost a Mourinho Fenerbahce kind of slip up, conceded a 98th minute equaliser at home to a 10-man opponent on Saturday in Rizespor.
Yeah, extremely disappointing for Fenerbahce, who had managed to put themselves in a position where it was in their hands, because they still play Galatasaray before the end of the season, to drop points to 10-man Rizespor. And then, of course, yes, can we? This is a very much hour 3 thing to say, Andy, but can we say that Mauro Icardi, the David Blaine of football? I mean, he spends a lot of time in a box, not doing a lot of things. Yeah, there we go.
I think we can say that. Also,
late night material.
Oh, yeah, it certainly is. With him being out of contract as well, I think we can still have our little dream of him coming to play in the Premier League. You know, if Marcus Thuram, another Inter number 9, is suited to it. Mauro Icardi clearly isn't, but we can still dream.
Yeah, I know all the stories are that the PIF are cutting back on their spending, but if there was ever a player who had the Saudi Pro League written all over him, it's got to be our man Mauro.
You see, no, I thought you were just trying to get Newcastle to buy yet more strikers. You know, I'm in favour of that as well. Why not, eh?
Yeah, no, but that is, as much as we joke, that is a big and significant twist at the top of the table in the Turkish Super League. It means it's back in Galatasaray's hands, and so very sad times for Fenerbahce. Meanwhile, over in Turkey, I don't like this, Andy, but it does seem like we might have to give Jose Mourinho some credit here. We're not able to get through the show without saying nice things about Jose Mourinho in this case, because they have beaten Sporting 2-1.
Yeah, bit of a Freudian slip there. He's back in Portugal now. He's not much mourned in Turkey, I think it's fair to say, and in Super League circles. But yes, Benfica are still unbeaten after the Segundo Circular derby, the Lisbon derby, away at Sporting. Sporting had most of the game, as you would expect. They missed a penalty in the first half. Colombian Luis Suarez had that saved by Anatoly Trubin, and then they got a penalty of their own, converted by Andre Schelderup. You see, I told you we'd lean into the Nordics for
nippy
this
Norwegian wingers. You know, Antonio Nusa
right.
doing the business.
That's right. We'll come to another one in a second. Don't you worry. I've got a further one up my sleeve. An equaliser for Morita, who'd given away the penalty in the first half. Sporting pushing for the winner, and then conceded actually what was a beautifully crafted goal by Rafa. Finished it off under heavy pressure at the end. Mourinho, as earlier this week, said afterwards, obviously I cannot confirm that I'm staying at Benfica. So they're in a funny old position, because what they've done essentially in this is they've made the championship almost Porto's. We talked about it being the weekend where Bayern officially got it done, where Inter almost got it done. Well, Porto beat second bottom Tondela 2-0 earlier tonight. Goals from Gabri Vega and Victor Froholt, the teenage Dane, who's just brilliant. And I'd love to get your brief take on him in a minute, Lars. But that means that following that win, Porto are 7 clear. They will still be 5 points clear if there's a game in hand that Sporting have got if they win that. But either 5 points, 7 points, with 4 games left in a Portuguese league season, these leads do not get overturned. So even Farioli and what happened to him at Ajax this season, I don't think they can mess it up from here. And remarkably, Benfica are still on course to go the whole league season unbeaten and finish 3rd.
Yeah, I do want to pick up. You mentioned the fact that Mourinho refused to confirm that he'd still be there, and this was. It's very rare that a journalist managed to one-line Mourinho in a press conference, but we saw a case of that in the press conference when he was asked, "Are you going to stay at Benfica?" He does this thing that Mourinho sometimes does when he gets a question he doesn't want to answer, which means he turns it back on the journalist. He's always done this, and the cheat code is to just say, "Oh well, nobody cares what I think." So he turned it back on the journalist and say, "Well, can you confirm that you will be with your employer?" And without missing the beat, the journalist said, "Yes, I can, because no one else wants me," which is tremendous. Big fan of that.
It was funny, wasn't it, to see genuine Mourinho laughter? How many times have we seen that? Not grinning at your own joke, but actually laughing at someone else's joke. That was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, tremendous.
The move back has been great for him. In another move over in Switzerland, FC Basel have confirmed that they will no longer be hosting a Kanye West concert at St Jakob Park, one of the most atmospheric stadiums, of course, in European football, one of the underrated atmospheric stadiums of European football. I suppose I should give them a pat on the back here, but they shouldn't really have booked him in the first place, should they? Look, just before we finish off, Lars, it would be negligent of me not to pick up the Bodo Glimt story because, of course, the Norwegian League has restarted. It's in its early stages as a summer league. They so impressed us in the Champions League in recent months before it all came to a screeching halt just before the quarterfinals in that second leg against Sporting. Has that had a lasting effect on them? Because Bodo Glimt, despite being, well, I guess now the richest team in the Norwegian League, they've had quite a slow start to the campaign.
Yeah, so they had some games postponed to do with their European adventures, which means they have actually 2 games. They've only played 4 games, whereas the league leaders Tromsø have played 6. So there's some time to make up some ground. But in those first 4, they've dropped points in 2 of them, and 2 wins out of 4 is not what they would have been hoping for. There's an interesting little subplot here because they didn't win the league last year. Viking of Stavanger won the league. The team that has 2 coaches. They've got equal co-coaches. You don't often see that. They won the league. Seems to work for them. They played each other in an early, presumptive top of the table game because Viking haven't lost a lot of players. They're expected to go again, and Bodo got trounced 5-0. And the interesting subplot here is the Bodo Glimt goalkeeper Nikita Haikin has received his Norwegian citizenship. Now, Haikin is Israeli-born, has a joint Israeli-Russian citizenship, has under-21 caps for Russia, but has lived in Norway for a long time. I believe he's spoken out against the war as well, which, of course, Russian athletes do at significant peril, given they may still have family back in the country, all these sort of things. So he has been fully accepted in Norway, even has a Norwegian wife, and is supposedly learning Norwegian. But he has gotten a citizenship, which is interesting moving into the World Cup because our first choice, Ørjan Nyland, has been on the bench for Sevilla for quite a long time.